Good morning to all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, joining us here in this auditorium, as well as those participating remotely from seminar rooms 11 and 12. A warm welcome to the second annual Chief Data Officer and Information Quality Asia Pacific Symposium. My name is Hui Sing, a Year 3 student from Nanyang Business School, and it is my pleasure to be your MC for today. Under the main theme of advancing knowledge for data leadership, the symposium will provide a platform for data leaders from academia, government, and industry to collaborate on Asia Pacific's hot topics on data and share ideas on data-driven value creation and innovation. Targeted at chief data officers, chief analytics officers, and heads of data and analytics, this symposium is organized into two sub-themes: data strategy and management, and analytics and AI value creation. So to start off this morning's program, it is my honor to invite Professor Fong, Interim Dean from the College of Business, to deliver her welcome address. Professor Bo, please.
Thank you. Good morning, our distinguished industry and academic partners, as well as the data professionals and data leaders who are here. Some of you are also alumni in our faculty, our students, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to NTU, Nanyang Technological University, and to our second Chief Data Officer and Information Quality, CDOIQ, Asia Pacific Symposium. The International CDOIQ Symposium was actually started by Dr. Richard Wong in Cambridge, MIT. It's now in its 18th year at Cambridge. Nanyang Business School, we really share Dr. Wang's vision, where we think it is really vital to bring together data leaders to actually share your knowledge and build a community of CDOs and data professionals. Which is why last year at NTU, we hosted the first Asia Pacific chapter of the symposium. And we're very happy to welcome back those who are here in 2023 and extend a very warm welcome for the participants who are joining us for the first time in the CDO APAC Symposium 2024 at Nanyang Business School. So the objectives of the CDOIQ APAC Symposium aligns really well with our Nanyang Business School commitment to developing thought leadership where technology and business actually comes together. So we see ourselves as a premier business school and a technological university. And to us, a large part of what we do is to integrate the domains of business and technology. And we aim to create and implement new ideas, research, and real-world practices targeted at integrating both technology and business. The Nanyang Business School is also where Asia meets the West. That's why today I think we also have some visitors in our region joining us in our discussion on data leadership. And to us, we also strongly believe that doing well should also be on doing good, which is why our conference today will also be focusing on ethical and responsible use of data, analytics, and AI. So as you can see, we approach data leadership with these similar goals. And for the 2024 symposium, our theme is on advancing knowledge for data leadership. So we have curated topics under two main sub-themes. We have the data strategy and management, as well as analytics and AI value creation. So both areas are really making a very big impact on the way that we work and the way that we live. So you can look forward to really a full and rewarding day of panel discussions as well as plenary sessions. We have invited experienced professionals from the technology and the healthcare sector to kick off our morning panel discussion. So we are all very familiar with how technology is changing the way that we experience our workplaces. So our panelists this morning will really be exploring how organizations can use AI and analytics to help to add value to this whole digital transformation process, to ultimately deliver in how organizations can use AI and analytics to add value to this whole workplace. So in the sessions that follow, we will have a chance to hear from government, financial, and educational experts who will be sharing their insights on ethics of AI governance, generative AI value creation, and the use of data platforms in education. So these conversations interest us a lot because they are of concern about the safe and responsible and beneficial use of AI and analytics in the everyday life. So after lunch, we'll be learning about how AI can be integrated into strategic business thinking. We'll be looking at how AI and data-driven innovation in Southeast Asian business markets and how AI and analytics are actually transforming the insurance industry, and also be prepared to be inspired by the potential to create complex and personalized business solutions, identify insurance risks, and prevent losses. We'll also be seeing how measures of productivity and returns on investments are done up close in a real-world banking model that is brought to you by a bank's Chief Data and Analytics Officer himself. And then finally, in our afternoon panel, we will be exploring how AI and analytics poses risks as well as benefits. So our panelists will draw on their experience in cybersecurity, data leadership, and Gen AI to help us to understand and manage the risks involved in using AI so that we can navigate this area wisely and well. So in closing, I look forward to seeing you all at today's sessions. Do take the opportunity to network, to ask questions, to carry on the conversations during break time and over lunch. We have a chance to enjoy our interactions in this beautiful, fully wooden building, which is the 8th Net Zero building at NTU campus. So feel free to take pictures, roam around, and I wish you have a fruitful and enjoyable day with us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Professor Bo. May I invite you to remain on stage, please? You may take a seat over there. Now for our panel discussion on how to enhance the outcomes of digital transformation with analytics and AI, may I invite our panelists to join our moderator, Professor Bo, up on stage, please. First up, Mr. Simon Long, Director of Technology, Strategy and Transformation at CBRE Singapore. Dr. Eric Wong, Group Chief Data and Strategy Officer at National Healthcare Group. Mr. Cumarran Kaliyaperumal, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Microsoft Asia. And last but not least, Mr. Andy Ta, Director of Data Analytics and AI, Chief Data Officer at Synapxe Private Limited. Now, just a note to our audience, please scan the QR code behind me should you wish to submit any questions to the Q&A panel at the end of this panel discussion. So, Professor Bo, over to you, please.
All right. Thank you very much. Warm welcome again. And thank you to our panelists for taking the time to join us. Maybe let me do a very quick introduction of our panelists. First, we have Mr. Simon Long. Simon is the Director for Technology Strategy and Transformation for CBRE Singapore. So I understand that he is essentially the consulting arm at CBRE, working with lots of large organizations like Google and Salesforce on various analytics, AI and data projects. Yeah. And then very glad that Dr. Eric Wong can take the time to join us. Eric is the Group Chief Data and Strategy Officer for National Healthcare Group. He's also a practicing doctor. Just now I was told that Dr. Wong was stitching up a patient and therefore might be 15 minutes late. What can we say to that, right? That nothing is much more important than stitching up the patient. So thanks very much for taking the time. And I think it's wonderful to be able to hear directly from Eric the complexities in managing data and analytics project in the healthcare domain. Yeah. And then we have Mr. Cumarran. I will not attempt to say your last name, right? He's the Chief Data and AI Officer for Microsoft Asia Singapore. And here, he has actually a lot of experience actually directly advising and working on analytics projects
across Asia. And therefore, I think we are looking forward to hear from you about your views. And finally, we have Andy Tan. Andy is the Director for Data Analytics and AI, and also the Chief Data Officer for Synapxe. And Synapxe also works in the healthcare domain, and I understand he actually works very closely with Eric, as well as various other healthcare groups in analytics and AI projects and other digital projects in the healthcare space. All right, so now we have a great set of panelists. So today's theme is really on talking about how we can enhance the outcomes of digital transformation with analytics and AI. So today we hope to explore both in terms of strategies as well as the various challenges that companies actually face in trying to digitally transform using the various and the latest tools in AI and analytics, which I'm sure every organization is trying to tackle. Even in the business school, in NTU, where we have the various administrative units, we are also constantly trying to look for ways to digitally transform ourselves using AI and analytics. So I thought maybe we could start with Cumarran. Given your broad overview that you might have, could you share with us what are some ways that you've seen that organizations have effectively integrated analytics and AI into their digital transformation strategies? Maybe you could give us an overview about what you have seen so far. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for everyone who have come here. I know it's a huge investment in time. So let me just share, I mean, as Microsoft, we do have the privilege and front row seats to help a lot of our clients and customers basically transform their business. And transformation is not easy, right? Because I would argue that as a startup, you basically have, blank canvas. But a lot of the companies we work with are enterprises that have legacy businesses, legacy architectures, people that they need to train, shareholders they need to answer to when they actually invest a lot of money in transformation. And finally, the actual transformation needs to lead to business outcomes, which can happen 18 to 24 months from now, and not in the quarterly cycles like Wall Street or any shareholder wants, right? And the quarterly board meetings. So for data and AI transformation, and our lens that we always bring is extreme and ruthless prioritization and link to business value, right? So this is something that I guess since I've started doing this in 2015 or 2014, everyone has repeatedly said. But in the era of Gen AI specifically, in 2023, I felt like everyone was just experimenting with the technology, right? They were like, okay, POC, great. I can get 20 PDF documents. I can slap on some Gen AI model on top of it, do some vector embeddings and get some information out of it, right, easily. 2024, we feel, is the year that a lot of them are taking this seriously. And we're seeing massive shifts in conversations. We're seeing conversations shift from, hey, what can AI do for me, to versus, hey, how do I set up the foundations to be successful for me to integrate AI into my business process? And I think the premise of your question was like, how are customers integrating data and AI into business processes? I would say very little, right? I would say very little. Because right now, it's still very fragmented, right? I would say yes, so there are cases where you have insurers. I think we saw an announcement with FWD, so this is public information, where Microsoft worked with them on call centers, on avatar agents, on selling, right? But largely speaking, like the majority of them are still figuring it out, right? They're still figuring out, and they're still having many little areas of how they can integrate. So I think this year and the years to come, one thing I can say is that the CDOs and the persona that all of you have to play in your companies become incredibly important, right? So yeah, it's a great time to be in this space.
All right, thank you. And it seems that you share very similar views as Andy, whom I'm next going to invite to provide some advice as well, as in terms of what you have seen that probably works in terms of integrating AI and analytics into your organizations or the healthcare sector's digital transformation strategies?
So I'll be speaking on, broadly about how we are helping public healthcare, because we don't really spend a lot of time in Synapse trying to maximize all this, because most of the time is spent helping the public healthcare. But we have been focusing more time on getting ourselves more ready for new technologies and challenges. So I think some of the things are, but we look at ourselves as one of the customers to ourselves. So I think the most important part of having the strategy is that the business, AI, and the IT needs to come together and have a synergized view on doing things, right? So I give an example. So if you have a very good AI, but there's no business use case or no business trust it, then it's just going to be a showcase, right? If it runs very expensively, taking a lot of compute, it's not going to be viable. So even if there's value, it's not cost viable, right? So all three needs to come together to have a means to bend the way we do things, so that we can get the right actions or the best decisions for the work that is being done on the ground. I think a lot of time, I see a lot of data strategies or technology or transformation strategies, which I was also a part of. We kind of like to put a lot of bells and whistles, but we forgot that actually everything has to blend together. So I think taking that step at the start is the most important. If there's no business priority to focus on, then there's no reason to transform, right? So I think that's the part that a lot of people needs to take care of. The other part is on how can we make it safe for people to fail, right? I think a lot of time technologies brings a lot of promises, but none of those promises comes with any caveat, right? I think, especially in the world of Gen AI, everybody must talk about Gen AI nowadays, right? It kind of reset everything that we know about technology and AI, right? We've been doing AI in Synapse for about 7-8 years, and this is a chance that we actually take back and kind of launch it in a way that we learn based on our 8 years of experience, to try to bring the user at the center of this, user and business at the center of this. So what we have done is, I think we have worked with Microsoft to build an in-house LM platform, so that it's safe and more cost efficient. And we have actually made this available to about 35,000 users across public healthcare, right? And end of this month, Singapore will come in. If I'm not wrong, early next month, whole of NSG will come in. Then everybody can get to use this. Now, there's nothing special about this, right? If there's about 40,000 users, everybody create one prompt that's very valuable to them. I think we did our job, right? It doesn't have to be sexy. So I think, and it's safe, and it's very, very accessible to them. I think that's one of the things that we are doing, that kind of put it around the user rather than put it on the chart and then make it very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see a few commonalities between what you shared and what Cumarran shared, in terms of, like you said, to really integrate business AI as well as business processes. So Andy, can you share with us some examples in what you did in your healthcare group for this to happen?
Yep. So I think maybe I share one of the projects we did using AI. That's the prediction of multiple readmissions in 12 months. So we recognize that there are a lot of patients in the healthcare system that comes back, have episodes within 12 months that kind of shows that there's the peaking point or the deterioration point of their health, right? And they use up a lot of services, they need a lot of help, right? Unfortunately, one of the problems that we have was that nobody from the hospital kind of know about this, or most of them, because some of the patients go to different hospitals. They go through A&E, they may end up in another hospital. So the data was not linked together, so they may not know at the point in time. So we did a study with ministry and the hospitals to link up the data from all the hospitals to identify this group of patients, and we recognize that trend, and we kind of identify the services to design a prediction model for patients at risk of multiple readmissions in 12 months. It's a mouthful, right? The typical one is a 30-day readmission. It's like a warranty, like come out from hospital, 30-day readmission, something is wrong. Sorry, Eric. But we want to look further, because I think we really care about that patient's condition. And we actually work together with all the different clinicians, statisticians, scientists across public healthcare to develop a model which was good, but actually we did a lot of things like validation, blind tests, prospective validation to gain the trust from the user. And concurrently, what we did was we redesigned the processes together with the different hospitals and make some tough decisions. Example, if a patient, by the time the patient exits the hospital, we will have known everything about the patient's episode. That would be the best time to make the prediction, right? From a science or AI perspective, that's the best, right? And that's what I would prefer. But from a business standpoint, is that the patient has left already. So it's kind of useless to know that the patient is at risk. They have to go out and bring them back, right? So we kind of make some compromises to predict at the point they get admitted. May not have the best accuracy because we don't have all the information, but we want to be able to predict at a point in time so that immediately things and protocols can follow, right? So we also did things like based on precision recall, we did a cut-off because I think surprisingly our clinicians say, don't have to be so high accuracy, but I need the volume of users because we want to help this group of users because we have set up the manpower and services to take care of all this. So we're okay that it's not very accurate, but we want to have more patients to come in rather than you give me just a few. So that will maximize how they invest time and the productivity of the people on the patients. So these were things that we have to work through to ensure that it makes sense. Of course, I could always just put a model there, 30-day readmission model, on the website. And every time a patient, end of the day, I'll predict all this. But it doesn't really help. But what we did was we integrated to the point that all the clinicians and nurses on the ground, they just follow. High risk, carry on. They trusted it, they know it. They don't need to know how it was predicted. They just need to know the information that helps them make the decision, and they just move forward. So it was a bit like Minority Report, but people are very comfortable with it. So it took about 1 year for us to launch this. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. I think that's a very good example of how you should be integrating the business processes and AI. Sorry. All right, so maybe I can also ask Eric to build upon the conversation, to share with us what are some of the challenges that you are facing on the ground, right, in terms of trying to implement the analytics and the AI for the digital transformation initiatives. And also, more importantly, maybe share with us how you overcome some of these challenges.
I can actually go and sum the challenges in one word: people. and how you overcome that, deal with the people. That would actually be my very short answer. But I don't think the audience want to actually go and hear forwards, right? So maybe I actually elaborate a bit. So just building on what Andy have actually mentioned. First of all, I think healthcare, where I come from, is quite a conservative and unique industry in the sense that we are actually, in fact, under a lot of regulations. And on top of that, the expectations of interactions from people would actually be personal. So that actually, in fact, set the backdrops of some of the things that we do that might be slightly different from other industries. So I just want to actually go and put that caveat out first. And the reason why I say it's actually people is that, for example, I mean, Andy, in fact, worked very closely with us on the models. When we actually go and sounds very nice, and it's actually, in fact, a very, very nice tool to have. But when we actually goes down to the ground and talk to the doctors and nurses, can you take a look at these informations? One of the commonest response to us is, so what? I know these patients have a risk of coming back, in probably around 3 weeks' time or 3 months' time. But it's not going to change how I'm going to practice and care for my patients. And so therefore, I mean, the point is this, a lot of the AI or analytic projects, we manage to actually go and provide a lot of information to the users or to various group of peoples. But sometimes a lot of those informations may not be contextualized. For example, your CEO will be taking a look at a set of information that is actually, in fact, important for his planning. But our doctors and nurses on the ground will need another set of information for them to actually go and execute what they need to do. And a lot of times, giving them information is not good enough. We recognize that, I mean, in order for us to actually go and really make good use of this information or this AI, results and things like that, actually a lot of work need to be done at the implementation science as well as the value management. I will actually elaborate a bit on the implementation science. What a lot of our experience, in fact, we have been building AI models or even machine learning models even before the AI become a buzzword for more than 10 years. The ones that are actually in fact successful are really the ones, at least from a clinician perspective, are really the ones that manage to actually go and change how we actually go and practice and how we engage patients. So one good example, in fact, is actually, in fact, I think over here, all of you have actually, in fact, went through the COVID period. In the National Center of Infectious Disease, on a daily basis, during the peak of the COVID period time, we see over 1,000 patients. Each of them need a chest X-ray. We do not have enough radiologists to actually go and read them. So in fact, we actually go and work with A-Star. We develop an AI model to actually go and help us triage and to actually go and do a screening of the chest X-ray to identify the ones that are actually in fact at a higher risk and therefore, have a higher probability of, having a pneumonia or COVID in this case, versus the one that is actually most likely normal. It wasn't a very glamorous project, and the results, I can tell you, wasn't presented in a very elaborated, very nice dashboard. But the only reason, or one of the key reasons why the project works is because we put a box running the AI model in our radiologist reporting station, and we actually go and link that box to a monitor next to their screen where they see the X-rays. And when they actually go and view an X-ray on the screen, the result is actually immediately visible on the other screen, and therefore they can actually go and make immediate decisions. And that we actually realized that I've actually in fact expedited a normal X-ray reporting time from 5 minutes to less than 1 minute. So this is actually in fact some of the good examples we work. Some of the ones that we don't work are actually in fact the ones that we actually go and put it, for example, in our EMR over a system, just on notifications. We expect people to click on it. We actually go and ask them, can you go and take a look and please? And that one, I can tell you, none of that works. So, I mean, this is actually, in fact, just some two extreme examples of how we actually go and do implementation science. And ultimately, it's actually, in fact, the value. So, like, I mean, the various speakers have actually mentioned earlier on, running a lot of these models and even designing a lot of these models takes massive, massive amount of compute as well as manpower. I think you all know data scientists are not cheap. and so, therefore, you need to actually go and really project on how you're actually going to deliver value. Need to actually go and do it in a very agile manner, but at the same time, make sure at least personally from what I've actually learned, make sure you have actually in fact have a very, very good foundations of being able to do it. So if I should just actually go and sum up what I'm trying to say here, well, to me, digitalizations or transformations with analytics and AI have to be underlined by a good value management, a good implementation science, but more importantly, actually, in fact, a good foundation in your data and a good foundation for implementation. So these are actually, in fact, the three take-home I have.
All right, very good. I guess you really bring home the point that at the end of the day, for the analytics and AI to be useful, we must be able to actually manage the people aspects and that should come probably right at the beginning rather than at the end, right? All right, Simon, I would also ask you to share a little bit about in working with all your clients in analytics and AI, what are some of the key challenges that they face, as well as how did they overcome some of these challenges?
How do we do this? And a lot of that is processes. And that's a really interesting point when we talk about digital transformation. Because I think about alchemists 1,000 years ago who were saying we're going to take lead and mercury and convert it into gold using a powerful stone, right? And everybody went, that's kind of a crazy hypothesis. But then we come forward, and in 1941, that powerful stone turned out to be uranium, and it was possible to nuclear transmutate mercury into gold. So effectively, what changed? Well, it took us 900 years to figure out the process. I'm hoping it's not going to be 900 years with AI for us to figure out those processes, but when we look at the challenges that we are facing, a lot of them need processes around them to help enterprises scale. So, and Andy mentioned a great one, that return on investment. What is the process that we need to define as an organization to build an understandable, effective return on investment model? And that includes various things. I take CBRE as an example. We say, okay, great, we want to enable all of our staff. I'm going to turn on Copilot. Turn on Copilot for everybody, right? That's a $40 US per month charge. 100,000 employees. I've just turned on a 4 million a month burn rate on my Microsoft licensing. That is not to say, however, that I will not see at an organization, with our turnover, that level of efficiency gains. But how do I convince the CFO? How do I convince the CFO on that? And we need a process that helps mark out all of those steps to build effective cost models that are understandable. That's part one. Second challenge, and I think this touches on perfectly what Dr. Wong, you just mentioned, is around the people. And what is the process that we say, right now we've justified the cost and we've got the investment sorted. How is that going to go towards our process for hiring, for staff development, and for new skills, right? So I think AI is seen as a big disruptor, and we're upskilling a lot of people right now, and we're looking at new talent. And I would say actually the balance is more on new talent, and that creates a lot of fear in organizations. So again, when you're thinking about putting this in, there's all the all the excitement about what it's going to bring, but a lot of people are going to get very worried in your organization that they're going to lose jobs. So what is the process for ensuring that we have an adequate upskill program to retain talent, as well as bring on new talent, to ensure that drive is sustainable without disrupting the organization on something we didn't see, which is everybody getting worried, going and leaving and doing other jobs. And then the third part is making sure that the underlying technology is sustainable. It's a big challenge. Things are moving insanely quickly at the moment. I come back to Microsoft just yesterday. Copilot plus PC was announced. So that is now Windows PCs that have an NPU built into them to do on-device, on-laptop processing of data, that you could disconnect that from the internet right now. That solves a lot of the security challenges that we're already planning for, and organizations are starting to make plans on. So again, what do we build in as a process to say, right, that's how we do it, that's how we build it, this is how we change it if we need to, this is how we're going to adapt going forward to keep pace with the technology, to get the best from it without losing too much of that investment. So those are what I'd say with the three key challenges around that. It's all around process. All
right, thank you. So just to delve a little bit deeper into this discussion that we had so far, I guess what I heard is really it's very important for us to be considering upfront, right? What is the value that this analytics project is going to bring? At the same time, what I've also heard is there's a need for us to really integrate with the business processes. That seems to put a lot of onus upfront in determining, which of these multiple AI projects is the one that is going to bring the value to the organization. So I would love to hear your thoughts about how do you go about that decision process? Anyone? Yeah.
I'll start. Yeah. It's never an easy decision. We have on average at least around 100 AI projects in the run on a yearly basis. Majority of them will fail. Majority of them will fail. And finding the capabilities for us and understanding how you actually go and provisions your resources to these areas have actually not been easy. Gratefully, I mean within NHG as an academic medical center, we work very, very closely with NTU Medical School. So we managed to actually go and push quite a lot of these AI projects into research, and we actually go and tap on some of the national research grants. But I think to me, there's actually always a two-tier approach to this. Number one, you want projects or ideas to actually be able to flourish, and you want to actually go and test it out. That to me is actually not so much aiming at the ultimate implementation. Like I said, at most, even by industrial standard, at most 20% of them will actually go into the full 9 yards. But it's actually, in fact, a very important learning process for you to actually go and inculcate the culture within the people. And personally, I think it's actually very important for us to actually go and groom our next generation clinician leaders to actually go and start doing some of this work. Having said that, you need them to land somewhere. And that, to me, within NHG, we actually also take a bit of an investment mentality to this, to make sure that, quite a lot of these things, after they have actually, in fact, went through the whole process of, getting buy-in, understand their process engineering, getting up the data model out, understanding how the human behavior is actually going to adapt it, and so on and so forth, they can actually go and bring it in safely and ethically. So over the years, while we have actually, in fact, doing a lot of these as a research project and trying to actually go and try to push it up, in parallel, we have actually, in fact, also put in massive investment to actually go and make sure we actually, in fact, have a platform when they are ready to actually go into an enterprise environment for them to actually go and really be widespread. So one example is that this year we are actually, in fact, pushing for our AI imaging platform. For us, I mentioned the chest X-ray model previously. It was actually hosted in one of the box. So we actually want to actually go into an enterprise platform. So when we actually, whatever models we have for image analytic, be it on chest X-ray, be it on mammogram, or even some of the ultrasound or CT scan, we have a platform integrated, with all the various systems that we have. So when it actually comes in, it's actually immediately able to actually go and deliver value. So I think these two have to run in parallel, and you cannot negate the investment in either one, because, or else, on one hand, you have a foundation with ideas. On the other hand, you have a lot of ideas, but without a good platform for them to actually go and come in. Neither of these will actually go and give you the end state you want. Yeah, so that's my sharing.
I'm happy to just share a couple of things that, I don't have the answer, but I can share what I've seen has worked. For success, people have managed to do this in the chance that they get. So number one, I feel that every single one wants to build. The first thing that they think about is, I want to build. I want to build the next application that is GenAI enabled. And the second thing they think about is, I want to build for the most complex scenario, right? So I've been involved in like hundreds of scenarios in the last 2 years, AI and GenAI. The number one thing that I always do when I come out of that meeting is scope it down, right? Totally scope it down to like about 20% about what you want to actually do, right? That will give you success. And then you make that measurement. A lot of them focus on the lagging indicators of success, which then when you report up to the board or to your stakeholders, it becomes very hard to justify. Because by the time we get to implementation and all of, so many things can fail. Everybody blames the technology, everyone blames the investment, everyone blames the people. So think about leading indicators of success, right? Even think about adoption metrics. Think about, hey, how many people are even using this that they didn't even use this before, right? The other thing that we encourage is, there's a lot of partners who've actually done the hard work. And if you're going to invest all this time to build a solution, that's great, that's your IP, but no one uses it, it's sunk cost. If you think about a SaaSified kind of model, you can turn it off. You don't lose that much, right? Let's just pick a license, like even Copilot, as Simon mentioned, right? Take a few licenses, try it. Look at the users, look at their user behavior. And now Microsoft is now looking, I speak for Microsoft, but I'm sure other hyperscalers and other partners as well offer that diagnostic data to you. So you know usage data, you know what people are using, what people are not using, when they are using it, when they are not using it, right? Then you can devise a better, more comprehensive plan for the entire rollout. And the last thing I would say is, and this has worked like beautifully, and I've only seen it happen in 2 companies globally. Again, my limited scope means that I only look at a few companies, so it's not a data point that but I've seen it happen in 2 companies. You put the responsibility of the P&L and the cost of the implementation of this technology on the business, not on the CDO office, not on the IT office, right? So when you choose a project, you look at technical feasibility, you look at business feasibility, and then you look at, in that feasibility matrix, you look at who is the champion in your company. So usually, I always advise customers, say, hey, this is the highest value, this is the easiest. But my number one question to them is like, okay, is this person actually convinced to implement AI in the business process? And usually, the person who's totally convinced, the value is not high, but it's okay, we start there, right? We start there, and then he takes on the responsibility, he brings budget, he or she takes the budget, and then he reports it, right? That has worked beautifully. Now, I'm not saying it works for all scenarios, or all companies, or all situations. It's very complex. I understand the P&L statements in reporting. But if there's a way to put skin in the game for the business leader to take ownership of the success of whatever AI project, then it is a higher chance of it succeeding. That's the point.
Add on. So I think to us, I mean, Synapse fully supports public healthcare, right? So for us, we have a limited group of people supporting a large cohort of people who also has working and collaboration with multiple parties. So to us, I think to look at all this initiative, I think generally there's three things. First one is problem. Be very clear about the problem. I'm not going to create an AI solution because I want a solution to do this. But we need to be clear what is the problem to solve. Right? There are many ways to solve the problem, and AI can be deployed in multiple ways to help in that. And it may not be one solution that can solve the whole problem. Right? So I think we need to be very clear problem. Then, like what Cumarran says, scope it down, then we can start something. Which leads to the second one, which is fail fast. Right? I actually assume all will fail. Right? You know, it's actually for the team to surprise me at the end. Right? Because we want to go through it very fast so that we know what we don't know very fast and what we can do very fast, and if it makes sense, do something about it. And we have some sign of life, we then push forward. And we do this by doing the build, borrow, buy. What we can buy, we buy. What we can borrow, then we tap on our friends, say, lend me for a while, right? And if no choice, then we build. But we want to go through it fast and then be surprised later. And then the final thing is this magic number called 3. Right? 3 iteration cannot make it, we will just carry on. Right? Life goes on, we will work on something else. What we learn actually is still something worthwhile, even though it may not be successful, but we just move on. Maybe the technology is not ready, maybe the environment is not ready, there could be many things that's not ready, but we just move forward. So I think that's the part that, you know, usually how we want to push forward for things. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, just to add that we see exactly the same thing, and what it is, and we encourage our clients to do, is invest some money and experiment. Just go out and learn. When I spoke about those processes, there are certain bits of data you will only be able to get through doing those sort of experiments and learning and that process. And you have to think about your investment being the value of those answers. You know, it's not something that's going to go out immediately generate revenue for you. It's going to be an efficiency gain, or you've learned something that people don't have, you couldn't have got. And I'll give you an example on that. One of the things that we've said is depending on the type of analysis you have, we have many different tools, AI tools, LLMs, and different models now, is go and try, like pick up a lot of them, software as a service, go and buy a subscription. Set up your Azure interconnect, do your OpenAI integration, go and get Claude, and then do the same prompt or the same query injection to all three or all 4 that you do, and then count the number of tokens, because a lot of people don't realize that each engine will look at it differently. And what does that mean when we talk about tokens? Tokens is the cost, and we've seen this, and you will end up optimizing your solution that you finally do based on the most efficient platform for that query. And then you get a cost per query. And you realize that if I send it to model A, and that suddenly cost me $1.57 for that query and that analysis, but model B, for some reason, that was $10, right? Because they handle it in different ways. That is not publicly accessible information, and your use case is unique. You will only learn that through experimenting, and again, coming back to having a process to make sure you do that. And that's where we've seen really great success with that. You know, go out, learn, play, practice, but take those learnings and build on them.
All right, thanks. I think we got a lot of nuggets in terms of how we should be experimenting and through that process to figure out really what to invest in. Yeah. I want to remind the audience that you can feel free to send in your questions. In a while, I'll also probably just open up to the floor to see whether anyone wants to ask the questions directly to our panelists. Maybe let me just sort of present one more question to the panel, right? So I think, as Simon was saying, things are changing really fast in the AI space, especially with the Gen AI space. So I thought maybe you could share a little bit about, with all these changes, how has the thinking on leveraging AI changed and why? And what are some of the implications, especially for talent development? Yeah. Cumarran, you want to start?
Sorry, the question is around
how has the thinking on leveraging AI changed and why?
Given Gen AI is now in play.
Yes.
And also how we're going to talent.
And with all the very rapid developments. Yeah.
This is a good question because, you know, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So if you and most of the time, the worry that I have is everyone just gravitates towards Gen AI. And if you look at a business process, since just connecting the dots to the earlier conversation, transforming a business process with AI is a series of steps. It's discrete. It's actually discrete. It's a discrete process. So you can actually go on a whiteboard and map out what the entire business process looks like. And for each of these discrete processes, discrete steps that an employee takes or a customer takes in his journey, there are specific pain points and interventions that you want to solve. And if you look at it, if you actually take the time to look at it, Gen AI only solves maybe the first part and the last part. Right in the middle, the 50% of all the challenges, like for example, forecasting, anomaly detection, churn prediction, and all of that stuff, it's actually normal AI, like what we call classical machine learning, which is my background, right? Your data scientists and all that who do these models with the data that you have, and then you move forward. So I think 2023, I felt this was a big, huge problem. I feel this is coming down a little bit. I think people are slowly realizing this because they didn't really know what it can and, more importantly, what Gen AI cannot do. But there's even more confusion in the market because you're talking a lot of multimodal aspects, like especially when people like OpenAI start coming out with true multimodal capabilities with GPT-4o, right? And then you realize that, hey, then this whole other aspect can be opened up, and then I can slap on GPT-4o and it solves everything. So it's like a pendulum, right? Like it always swings. You can never prevent this. It's something that is human nature. It's sexy. It's shiny. You want to kind of use it. It's great. I would just kind of caution everyone to get into the fine print, to not just look at what it can do, but also what it cannot do, so that you know your boundary conditions as a leader, and you know where to guide your teams to say, hey, why don't you consider this for this particular aspect, but let's not lose focus on where our people can add value, which is where the talent point comes in. Like AI is it's an agent, right? It's a co-pilot, right? Look, I'm not going to say never, but in today's context, there are a lot of things that we need to do, and AI will help you, right? And I go back to classical machine learning. I go back to the aspect of data scientists, right? There's a lot of models that you still need to build. Now, you have, AutoML, for example. You have a lot of tools that help you think through the easiest way to get to the answer, but you still have to do it, right? And then you also have the upstream part of it, which is data engineering. Now, Microsoft has a product known as Magical Fabric. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's completely SaaSified. It helps, I have a data background in terms of data engineering, and we used to spin up a lot of Spark clusters, maintain those clusters, figure out how I'm going to do my ETL jobs just so my data scientist is happy, right? Because my worst nightmare is getting into a meeting and the data scientist complaining that the data is rubbish, right? So I actually feel happy for the DEs meaning data engineers in the market today, right? Because Copilot will completely change the way you do work. Right? You basically tell the agent what pipeline you want to build. In a few clicks, you integrate data from multiple sources into a platform which you then can build from. So I think if we take ourselves out of what Gen AI, solving for Gen AI, and you say, hey, because of this, there's so many other things that I can free up my time for, that would be my hope and where people will eventually gravitate. The pendulum will come down, I feel.
So first I want to say I'm very happy about Gen AI. For people working on AI, previously something very passive, right? But at a very personal level, it kind of remind me about the time where I started on computing XT, AT, XT, 386, 486. I think most people don't understand what I'm saying. Then it was the mobile phones. Then was the iPhone 2, iPhone 3. There's a lot of excitement because every new iteration came with a totally different revelation, right? Even Windows previously, XP, etc. Now Windows always the same, right? But I think with the new one, Copilot plus Windows, I think the world is changing and there's a lot more excitement, right? And I think this is a good thing, right? And we are in a situation where there's kind of a reset, right? If you don't recognize it, because if we talk about machine learning and what we call classic AI, good old traditional AI, I mean we have the Googles, we have the Microsoft, we have a lot of people that say I've been doing it for many years, I know how it's done. Consulting companies will come and tell you I've been doing this for the customers, I know. But Gen AI, nobody knows. We are starting from same ground with different aspect of the understanding of the domain, but everybody can contribute to this new domain, right? The most scary thing is to ignore that you need to invest time to understand this domain, right? Because just like IT, right? I mean, most people when they have their education, they learn about mathematics, science, bio, etc. IT was a specialized track that you have to go and take, but now everybody takes IT as part of the course. But previously also, and for most people that's working now, nobody took AI, right? And a lot of people who are now very senior, they learn about AI, they get bits and pieces, they form their opinion based on what they understand, maybe a bit about technology, maybe about math, maybe about everything. I think it's very dangerous. I think we may be making the wrong decisions at the top. So actually it's important to learn together as an organization to move forward, right? And AI can no longer be something that the top management say, let's use this and everybody just do it, right? I think everybody on the ground needs to understand how to harness it. Like building a pipeline, if I give crap prompts, it'll come out with a crap pipeline. You actually spend more time, right? So I think these are the time where it's very exciting and the learning at every individual level and at the organization level needs to start. And I think needs to partner with collaborators like Microsoft, Google, or everybody who's moving forward and chart out this new journey together. The worst thing is to just either wait for it or hope that it will go away. Then the story about the robots taking over will come true for you. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the questions coming in, many questions. I must ask this question, all right, because this is related to our discussion. It asks, are many CIOs, CDO, or CEOs looking at AI more due to FOMO factors, fear of missing out, FOMO, than any strategic reasons?
Yes. They are, but you have to admit that that is going to be expected, because it's not necessarily FOMO. It's fear of falling behind, and even if you don't understand it, the vast majority of the C-suite know that this is a big thing that we need to pay attention to. So I would say, yes, undoubtedly there are people chasing, but that is not a bad thing, because it's the risk of falling behind if you don't adapt and adopt. And where we're seeing businesses really propel forward are those early adopters right now. And we have very quick, very big wins that we are seeing from industries that have gone and taken the plunge. So they're seeing that. And yes, that will create the fear of missing out, but in the right way.
Maybe welcome anyone who also want to contribute, and then I will open up for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think not fear of missing out, right? But it's a really, I think we are at a stage where we are running out of people, right? Singapore is very small. So I'm very myopic. I think about Singapore only because we are for Singapore public healthcare, right? So we cannot hire everybody to public healthcare to take care of ourselves. Doesn't make sense, right? We still need people in finance, still need people in Microsoft, etc., etc. But the only way is to augment the people that we have, because they are highly skilled, right? From Synapxe's perspective, there's no other way to explore, not the fear of missing out, but there's no other way to explore other than this, on top of optimizing our costs for technology to support healthcare and to make healthcare services more easily accessible for population. So it's something that we kind of like I shared before, about 7-8 years ago, we started to double down, right? I mean, I was hired 7 years ago to do this. So it's not because of fear of missing out, but I think it's one of the only ways that we need to figure out how to use that to help our clinicians, our healthcare workers do more with less, and to tap on their expertise in a better way. So I think that's the perspective. I think for most people, when ML, AI came out, it was like kind of F1 in my mind. It's like something that the rich companies will have, right? Or an excuse to do it because your board members say you all need to innovate, right? So, but I think it's becoming very serious now because it's really at the individual level. You don't need to be a very big and rich company to invest in that, right? But I think it makes sense now to invest in your people because just like any experimentation, even if the first use case fails, second use case fails, the individual retain that knowledge, and that's getting the organization more ready for new things to come, right? Like I said, this now is like the Windows XP. We haven't moved to a multi-model, very complex agent kind of environment, which is going to be even more complex for people to understand. But we don't start now, I think we are definitely going to lose out to the machines. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll open up to the floor for any questions. Yes, Kim Wai.
Good morning, everyone. All the speakers, I've learned a lot from you. I'm not a data scientist. I just look at it from the process, business perspective. I think Cumarran mentioned that your clients always want to have the complex system, perfect model and so on, want to do it 100%. And then your advice is to scale down to at least 20%. So the process of scaling down from that 100% to 20%, what kind of challenges you face and making sure that the initial project, or 20%, 10, 20%, is scalable, especially now the technology is moving so fast. And a related question, I think I like the idea of having two-tier process, your imaging platform and then all the ideas. I think these two questions are related. Whether your imaging platform has to be tweaked or iterated as you move on with all the individual 100 projects. So that's my questions. I think these are related questions.
Many challenges. I think I assume you're asking less on the people challenge, like how do we convince our clients to move?
Whatever challenge you face, you meet your clients, the client put on the board the complete system that they hope to have, but then you come in and say, no, this is not going to work because you have to start small and you're going to scale down to 20%. From that 100% to 20%, how would you advise the clients?
Okay, sure.
Making sure that further down the road, whatever you invest for the next 12 months is still usable. Okay?
Totally. So most of the time, when we engage in these discussions, that 100% is actually an end state solution. It's never, as Andy mentioned, what the problem is. Okay. So step one is there's will be a lot of pushback to say everything, but we go back to first principles. We say, okay, can you just explain to me what the user journey is? Take, for example, imaging or any user, let's say you're underwriter in an insurance company or a doctor in a hospital, right? And then you map that out. And then you say, okay, if you were to solve just access to information rather than reasoning over the information and getting insights faster, right? Would that not, if I were to do this in, say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, would that not be success? Then the person says yes, and then you move on and on and on. So as an example. Now, that's one way to kind of shift mindsets, and that's like the people side of things, right? And usually, I would say 99% of the time, people are okay with it, right? But I think your question is also even more fundamental, is that, okay, since I build these processes, do I then build 10 different POCs? That means if I have a business process, right? Let's say there are 10 steps. I'm just making this up, right? And then you say, I'm just going to solve for 2 steps. And then you do 1. And then you solve for another 2 steps. And then you do 1. That's not a sustainable path to success, because what you want to do is you want to build this, you want to make sure that the architecture is such that you can build on this to do the next. Now, how do you do that? It's your question, I assume, right? I'm not saying this only because I'm a cloud provider, but the answer is actually through cloud, right? Why? Because it's serverless, right? It's like your energy meter, right? And you'll be surprised how many people don't fully understand the value that cloud brings. There is a huge segment of our IT professionals who still think, I need a project, I need to buy a server. I need to build hardware. I need to buy a lot of these things, put it in there, and then upgrade them over time. No, that's not the answer. All you need is a credit card. You get a credit card, you spin up the resources, as Simon was saying, and everything is there at API based. Everything is there for you. It's all API based. Yes, you need to stitch together the right architecture, but it's very basic. The architecture is very basic. Then you get into complexities about, hey, where the data resides. Hey, what are your I say AD protocols because I have a Microsoft Azure head, but authentication, right? How do you make sure the data is protected? How do you make sure that you get the right data in there? Again, it's not rocket science, and it's not sunk cost for you to figure this out, because a lot of these services are now API based. It's very different in the past, right? In the past, you need very specialized skill sets to sit and actually build those code pipelines, do those transformations so in a very complex way to eventually feed into your model. Today, with a sample data set that you have cleaned up, you can easily access a ton of models, even Gen AI, even Gen AI. A lot of them are API based, and some of them are also model as a service, what we call model as a service, where they become a managed service for you. You don't have to do anything. So back to your original question, making sure that it is something that you continually build on. You have to you don't have to use money to build the hardware and the infrastructure. You just rent it, and then you swap in and out as you scale. A lot of these things are serverless. You don't have to go and provision resources. So, in one word, I would say cloud. There are many other aspects, but I think 60% of your problems will be solved if you want to scale this out. If you think about that kind of architecture.
Actually, Cumarran answered most of the question already. I'm just going to actually go and add probably around 1 or 2 points. Like it or not, I don't know how many in the audience here is actually cloud native. But in healthcare, like it or not, we are still a hybrid. You still have a architecture that is actually housed in some data centers that you actually go and own, and you actually in fact have some service on the cloud. So just now I was actually in fact talking about the 2 tiers. Ultimately, it's actually some sort of one term now, which is actually what is actually the gold state architecture that you're actually in fact looking at, that is actually in fact scalable, and yet mimic your production environment, so you can actually go and have a very, very short runway of actually in fact trying to actually go and bring them up where the value is. A lot of times, I think, when we do models, traditionally, you have a bunch of data scientists, get a bunch of data, de-identify them, actually run models and things like that. After you actually done that, I want to actually go and put into productions. It's actually, in fact, the interfaces, the API calls, the architecture that actually go and end up killing you and killing the project and killing the enthusiasm. And so therefore, when we actually go and design this, for example, like the image we were talking about, we ask ourselves, if I have an X-ray, what is actually, in fact, the minimum viable architecture I need in order to deliver that. And then the next question we actually, in fact, ask ourselves is, what if I actually going to have 50? What if I going to have 100? What is actually, in fact, how do I actually go and scale this structure? And most importantly, the current minimum viable architecture, is it scalable? And I think these are actually, in fact, very, very important questions that you need to actually go and ask probably in the first 5 questions that you ask yourself. Because without sorting it, you realize that you actually go and be chasing your own tails by redesigning your architecture, in an iterative loop, and that's actually not going to be productive. Yeah, so that is actually just what I want to actually go and add.
That's an excellent point. I think, I don't want to belabor that one, but that was an excellent point that I missed out as well. Like the whole DevOps cycle, right? There's a huge LLM ops cycle that you need to also think about, and data ops, right? So not just your software development phase with the CI/CD protocols, you also need to make sure that your data is refreshed, right? And how are you making sure your data pipelines don't break? Because if you're moving it into production, it's a whole different ballgame, right? And you want to make sure that you are not, and when you say scale, you mean production, right? I mean, two sides of the same coin. And that process is integral, which is why a lot of tools are out there for you to actually use that from the beginning. Don't just do a POC on your laptop and then say, okay, now I'm going to think about scale, and we're going to bring in those LLM ops tools, your RAI to responsible AI tools, and DevOps tools. Yeah.
Our imaging platform, right? The imaging platform. Yeah. So I think I just want to clarify. So we're helping them build a platform, right? It sounds like a very big deal, like but actually it's a DevOps environment, right? With the minimum viable components, right? And ideally with partners and architectures that based on your current patterns that you have defined for different kind of use cases in ops or future use cases, you can quickly turn them on so that you can scale. So while it sounds nice, it's actually very simple, very not sexy one, right? I think, but that's important, you see, because by not over-investing, then you can scale faster because you are ready to give up things or incorporate new things. I think, and main thing is to make sure that the architecture is open, so you can accommodate as many of the products or integrations or source system as possible. Yeah, I think that's what we are taking approach to most of the work that we are doing now for AI, for all this. We are trying to create a platform. Sounds very nice, but actually inside is very, very simple, right? We utilize a lot of the cloud, concepts. We don't have to design the system to be fully optimized or fully very good, clean architecture, because we don't need the system to run 10 years before a type refresh, right? We can throw it away next year. So we keep it light, we keep it different parts, but very interoperable so that we can actually continue add on or drop if it doesn't work. But then we drop parts of it, not the whole thing. Yeah.
So what you say is interesting. However, for small organizations, this kind of even very simple DevOps environment might not be feasible for them, right? So how would you advise small organizations who might want to actually leverage on all these developments in AI and Gen AI? Because I guess what they would be seeing is lots of vendors. Every vendor is now talking about, I have AI now integrated into my suite of products, but every product that they would have to buy, they would have to pay. So what would be your advice to these kind of smaller firms in how to leverage the technology?
Icing that everybody wants to put on their cake, regardless of whether that was a tasty cake to begin with. So we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. The advice that we've given to smaller organizations actually is linked to a framework that we've begun to release with good results, the same as the larger organization, and I'm very happy to share it with this room. We keep it quite simple. Draw a line down the middle of a paper, and on the left side of that line, you've got to write down all of your internal applications and systems. On the right, you face everything that's external, your customer website, any services that you offer accessible to the public domain, anything that you might be as a professor, everything that's customer facing. If you then draw a line horizontally through that, and you think about that top to bottom list being security, high, low, Like what is a low security, like a low data security, low data risk internal system? That bottom left box, in there you will find things like holiday processing, leave requests. You'll find things like checking in about your benefits for what is on your healthcare. You will find things like, accessing internal information, finding out about corporate events. All those things will end up starting to be in those bottom left box. They are the lowest risk applications you can AI enable right now. Because they're internal, so only your staff are going to complain. It's not going to be detrimental to your external image. If data leaks, it's largely stuff that you've got to be not too worried about. And you will learn so much. So if you target your POC to be in those groups, that investment in learning, educating, upskilling, finding out what works for you, getting the infrastructure connections right, through that you can then scale. And you can start to then look at maybe going either to the right, what is the low external data to bring in better customers, or going up to saying, right, okay, we'll stay on the internal side of the fence and start moving up the track. So again, radiology, imaging is internal data, looking at that. It is not the full patient record. It's on that sort of mid-tier. It is a scan. You could particularly anonymize it pretty easily by using a coded reference, doing something like that. So again, it fits in that kind of domain for good places to start, to build, to learn, to development. And those exist in corporate environments as well. And we've seen really good results of that. We've seen it where suddenly HR are turning around and saying, you know what, we get half the emails now, just asking us about stuff, and this has been really good internal, and it's freed up a lot of our time to start doing other stuff. So then that helps to build your justifications and your return on investment models for scaling that further. You say, well, by doing this for them, we got this much back, they've gained this much time, it cost us this.
So on the concept of platform is exactly why we wanted to do something that we can keep and control so that we can use different products, right? I think like using radiology as an example, every vendor that comes to us will say, you must buy my end-to-end solution, right? And it costs millions of dollars just for one model, right? Imagine how many different kinds of x-rays that we take. Are we going to spend millions of dollars for all the different models and have so many different systems, right? It doesn't make sense. So therefore, we come up with one platform that has all the integrations based on our study of what we need for our healthcare system, and we manage that, right? And we tell the vendors, I'm not going to buy everything, I'm just going to buy this part, but I can integrate with you. And using open standard, we can host it here, right? So that I can work with multiple vendors, right, and not be locked in. Of course, to run the platform, there will be some cost, but we are trying to, cost containment is a very big topic here. We try to design a system where if there's no customer, how much will the platform cost to run? Ideally zero, never possible, but as close as possible. Then we scale up as the use cases come. And you may need partners or collaborators to build that together with you, but you need to be clear how it will be important for your business. It's the no regrets components that will work in your system that you should invest on. So that should be something that is called platform. I know there are a lot of sexy things like platforms like with bells and whistles, right? You can, right? Even healthcare, we don't buy a lot of that. Some, we buy some. We don't buy a lot. So I don't think everybody should be buying all of those things, right? Maybe go with one, but make sure they are open that can be used for others. Yep.
I'll start. Actually, I don't need to pull them. No, okay, so maybe I go deep a bit. First of all, technology is moving faster than we can adopt. At least, that's from my lens how I've actually been seeing it. And more importantly, technology have been more adaptable than traditional AI shop or IT departments can adopt. When you actually go and think of from these two factors, literally, on a regular basis, I still practice in ED. So when I actually go back, I had a lot of junior doctors coming to me. Hey, Prof. Eric, I have this, interesting idea. Can we try it out and things like that? I think the coverage in the news over the past years of all these AI have actually been a treasure trove for us, because previously we need to actually go and really pull people to actually go and come in. And we actually need to actually go and tell them, hey, by the way, this is actually probably a nice tool with these possibilities that you can actually go and do. But now, at least in the younger generations, I get a very strong sense that they're actually very eager and they are very, very interested to actually go and try out. So I was actually, in fact, just going to supplement on the earlier questions. You asked me, the question was actually how small groups, not just small business, but small group of people with limited resources can actually go and, start these things. Actually, it's actually very straightforward. Within NHG, I just tell my nurses, our doctors, our pharmacists, and even our operators, well, know the do's and don'ts, and just go and play, because there's no such thing as I need to actually go and set up a server for you, I need to set up architecture for you, and I need to actually go open certain firewalls for you before you can actually go and do these things. Nowadays, all these things are actually on the internet, and as long as you know, for example, in our healthcare, you don't actually go and start putting patients' information there. Actually, it's actually, in fact, quite a safe environment for them to actually go and try out some of the new ideas. And it actually becomes a virtuous cycle. The more you let them try, the more they learn about the tools, the more they actually go and explore. And in turn, they actually go and become their business sponsor to actually go and help you. And we actually go and, in fact, see that, our people, or we have actually, in fact, our committee of AI practitioners as a committee of practice. We have actually, in fact, seen that group within NHG grow from just 20 people to now around 500 people now. And they actually consist of all the way from our senior management, all the way to our junior staff. And all of them have excellent ideas that they actually, in fact, working together with us to actually go and do it. So to me, it's not so much of whether you pull them over to actually go and help you, but how you actually go and develop an environment and to cultivate and culturalize this as part of your business. And therefore, people will actually go and, kind of like an autopilot, not co-pilot, autopilot to actually go and discover new things. And I can tell you, from my own experience, the idea that it comes to you is actually going to amaze you, and you will have problem catching up.
I just add very quickly, what we say is C-suite engagement is essential to getting anything AI. And ideally what your organization needs is a trusted advisor, and that can be somebody internally, it can be, the CTO could take that role, somebody like that who's really passionate about it, it could be an external consultant. And then you need, before you even think about it, buy-in, that they will have access to the CEO, CTO, CISO, that C-suite, a CFO, to go through and check and validate everything. It has now become a standard question that I ask the clients who want to engage around AI work is, if I come and you want to do this, will I have access to those people? Will they make time for this? Is this a project you are really buying into? And if the answer comes back no, then I say, well, this project won't be successful for you, and it won't be successful for me. So thank you, move on type thing. Without that level of engagement from the business, these programs are unlikely to succeed, and you're unlikely to see value from them.
So from my perspective is, to be honest, there's a lot of pilots in healthcare, right? We have so many technology projects running that we are supposed to have more pilots than the Air Force, right? So it's like hundreds and thousands. So I think one of the things we want to make sure is that we want to accelerate and bring them across, right? To lend them. I think when you say who do you bring for projects, right? In my mind, it's a top-down, left-right approach, right? So depending on who it is, you may want to get a lower-level person on the ground to make sure that the idea actually makes sense on the ground, right? And iterate through what's the problem. I think a lot of time people are very excited about the solution. They think that it works, and it doesn't. So I think with the bottom part, get the hypothesis validated. I think we come up with a business case, right? Then the left and right. The left is that get the technology providers, the ancillary teams that's working together to contribute as well. Because they may be looking at a very narrow problem, and there could be impacts. You solve this problem, it could break other people also, right? So bring them in, especially the tech folks, right? Then after that, the right side, collaborators and partners like Microsoft, right? The build, borrow, and buy. If they already say, hey, I've got something, don't need to think really, quickly go and try it. They say offer it for free, just do it first, right? Then if it works, then if we have even more numbers or data to show, then come to the management, get the direction, show them all these things, right? I think usually the management will come with, can you do more? Why can't you do bigger? Can you do faster? Yeah, so I think in healthcare, the people at the top are very excited. Yeah, so the moment you touch on is like, can faster, more, cheaper, more people involved, right? So I think that portion in healthcare, I think we're not too worried. But it's to make sure it gets correct. Imagine the one that the person have a good idea, but it may not be really realistic. Then we just mention it to the management, wow, very good. Okay, let's do this fast and let's go, right? Then we may end up it hanging up there because we didn't close the loop with the rest. The journey will be longer. So usually that's how I look at it, yeah.
One quick comment, then we'll wrap up.
A few things. One is, you can do something small, right? And when we do POCs or we do pilots, it shouldn't be throwaway. I think that was the point the gentleman was trying to make. That when you do something, you start it with the right foundations, with the right tools, right, and all of that. Now, then the question is, hey, small businesses don't know how to start the right way, right? My advice is don't even start, because it's very hard, right? Go and look for vendors, get external help, spend the money, rather than trying to build that capability internally, because it's going to be very, very challenging. It's very easy to do POCs that are throwaway. It's very simple. In fact, you go to Azure today, there's a demo environment for you. Just one click, you can upload a PDF, you can actually do it. But if you really want to do something that's scalable, then I suggest if you're very small, you don't have the capability, I suggest you look outside first before trying to spend the next 12 months. I think also your question I wanted to touch, I don't know if you actually wanted to allude to that, is there's a talent problem, right? It's a talent problem. Today, I would say very few companies have the people in the business that can work with you to justify ROI. How do you actually get somebody? Who do you go to? Is it a business analyst? Is it somebody who's in the front lines? Is it a relationship manager who will actually own the process of saying, this is how much impact I'm going to make, this is how long it's going to take, and this is the technology cost, right? This is what we call, I think back when I was in McKinsey and Quantum Black, we call this profile a translator, right? He sits on both sides. And you have business skills to quantify, and you have some sort of technology. But this does not exist in many companies. So if your question is around the talent aspect, you have to hire them, because the business itself runs on the P&L. That means if you're selling insurance, they don't have anybody who's going to help you do ROI analysis. No, it has to come from your team. If you're in the IT team, right? Which means you have to hire those people who are actually going to sit with the RMs and ask them the right questions to build the business case, right? If you don't have that talent, you don't have time, get an external consultant, right? And I think that's your point, to go to a trusted advisor, get a consultant to actually do that analysis for you. Otherwise, you go into the process of what we just spoke about without the right business value justification. Easy to say, but harder to do. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. That's it.
It's the role of the CDO for small companies.
Yeah, but you got to hire the talent.
Right, get the training. You may not have it today, but must get on the training. Yeah.
All right, and with that, we've run out of time. I'm sure there are a lot more questions that you have in your mind. But feel free to approach our panelists during the break, and I'm sure they will hang around to talk to you further. All right. With that, I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time to share their insights and to share their experience with us. A round of applause, please.
All right. Thank you, Professor Bo. Could I also invite all our panelists and Professor Bo to the front for a group photo? All right, thank you, everyone. Let's give them all another round of applause. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the first segment this morning. Before we continue the symposium, we'd like to invite you to head out to the event square for a morning break. The following session will commence at 11 a.m. sharp, where we'll welcome Ms. Lee Wan-Xie from IMDA to speak. Before you go, please remember to take your belongings and dispose of any litter. Thank you, and we'll see you after our morning break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all enjoyed your break and are ready to dive back into the action. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Lee Wan-Xie, Director of Data-Driven Tech at Infocom Media Development Authority, up on stage for her talk on Singapore's approach to ethical AI governance. A gentle reminder to scan the QR code behind me if you'd like to submit any questions over the course of her sharing to be addressed in her Q&A session afterwards. So now, let's give Ms. Lee a warm welcome. Ms. Lee, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wan-Xie. Thanks so much for having me here today to share a little bit about what we are doing in AI governance in IMDA. What I will cover today is maybe in two parts. One is a little bit of context setting in terms of where we are in the world of AI, in terms of adoption and some of the concerns that organizations are facing. Then two, then what are we doing in Singapore to try and address these concerns or these risks. I won't cover the breadth of our work, but highlighted some areas in which we're making some efforts in, right? So. Yeah, here we go. Feel free to, I think there was like a QR code just now, so feel free to ask questions, and I think just make this a little bit more interactive if you like, and my presentation may take about 15 minutes. I'll move through some of the slides quite quickly, so if there are any questions, let me know and I'll take them at the end. Yeah, thanks. So in terms of context setting, I know it's really hard to see because all the words are quite tiny, but you can look up this report from McKinsey, but it's really about how I think organizations are increasingly using AI, especially right with the introduction of Gen AI last year, and both to address their top line revenue concerns. That means how do they drive revenue increases due to AI, as well as to manage the bottom line in terms of addressing the cost of operations of business, right, using AI. So businesses. I mean, from my own experience, suddenly there's been a lot of interest, partly also because Gen AI for a lot of organizations is sort of an easy entry into AI in terms of identifying how they're going to advance their business interests, right? And for those who are using Gen AI, most of them are actually looking at internal-facing use cases. On this chart, there are some of the various ways in which organizations are addressing their needs through AI. Text summarization, customer service, and so on. And a lot of it is, majority of it is internal facing, right, today. And the reason for that is because there are still many concerns about whether large language models or Gen AI can actually effectively meet their needs, but also whether they can address some of these risks that are inherent in the use of LLMs, right? So I'll just have a couple of examples on the chart here. One example is a very recent one from Air Canada. They have a chatbot dealing with customers, right? And then there was a question from a customer that says, oh, will I get a refund? Or I don't have I can't remember the specific details, but something along getting a refund for a particular situation, right? The chatbot says, yes, you can, if you do it this way and that way, right? But turned out that actually that's against Air Canada's policy. And when Air Canada refused to fulfill, right, that refund, they were taken to court, and then they were made to honor the refund policy. So this is one example of how it's important to figure out how you use these technologies effectively. It's very good at engaging customers, but you also need to make sure that you deal with the fact that these LLMs can hallucinate, right? If you can hallucinate means they'll actually make stuff up, right? Because that's inherent to how these models work, right? So how then do you address these hallucination issues, right? At the same time, there are other issues around, leaking of sensitive information, around copyright concerns on how potentially your output can be very similar to copyrighted material because of how the models have been trained. They ingest a lot of potentially copyrighted content, and if the output is very similar, then will you run into copyright issues downstream, right, as a user, right? The model developers, of course, have to deal with upstream problems around what data they use for training, but as a user, you will have to worry about what the output, right, that you have actually used a prompt to generate. And as I already mentioned, what if your employees are using it and then leaking some of your internal sensitive content to the models as well. Besides that, there are also some concerns around, deeper issues around potential harms that these can generate. So number one, especially among many people, is how it can introduce, or AI can introduce bias in decisions that are made about individuals, right? Not just in, well, this has already started to appear in what we call the traditional AI space, but in Gen AI as well. So if there's discrimination, this can result in some severe outcomes for individuals, and eventually, if this comes to light, then it will actually impact organizations' brand as well. I mean, brand, besides regulations, brand reputation is probably one of the main drivers of how organizations are thinking about making sure they address some of these AI risks, right? So in order to deal with all of these, companies are increasingly adopting responsible AI measures, right? But at the same time, if you look at the second chart, they also acknowledge that their level of preparedness for generative AI, for putting in place managing the risk in Gen AI is quite low. So they need help, right? Then how then do we get to offer this help? I was having dinner with one of my friends recently. He's from a big bank, right? Not even SMEs, big bank, global bank, not a local bank, global bank. And then he was saying, yeah, they invest a lot in responsible AI measures, but at the end of the day, what exactly will they do? It's not clear yet. And this is from organizations that have the resources to invest, right? So they need some clarity in terms of where should they be, what risk should they be mitigating, and how should they be doing it, right? So that's one, organization's concern around addressing risk in AI. Two, the consumers are also starting to be much more aware about AI risks. So yesterday there was a forum letter where somebody wrote and say, look, large language models, when I put in my name, I might actually get rubbish about me being generated from the model. So they're starting to get concerned about this, and then they're asking, so what is the government doing about it, right? So as the government, we have to figure it out. But some of these things are really about how then do we deal with consumer education, how then do we deal with making sure organizations put in place the right practices. So 2, how do we address consumers' concerns? 3, increasingly, I think governments around the world are also starting to put in place regulations. We have the UI Act that has been in discussion for actually a few years now, finally passed, and it's one of the first wide-ranging regulations around AI, right? Of course, China has been doing it since last year or a couple of years ago, but very much internally focused, but the EU one will actually impact a lot of companies who want to deliver products and services to the EU, or who are delivering products and services that will impact EU citizens, right? And then US also started to look at what they need to do. A lot of it is in the wake of increasing concerns around generative AI. And last year, Biden passed an executive order to say these are the things that US needs to do to address AI harms. So there's a lot of governments responding, and these will not be the only ones. Increasingly, we are starting to see more and more regulations coming from government. Canada has the Data and AI Act already. Not much details in there yet, but it's already passed something, and others will follow, right? So how then do we make sure that companies can meet these requirements from different markets? How then do we make sure that companies, especially our companies in Singapore, are able to continue to deliver their services outside of Singapore before this fragmentation in terms of how governments are thinking about AI requirements in their regulations? So what are we doing in Singapore? The first thing is we believe that we shouldn't just be looking at addressing risk from just addressing risk perspective. We look at it quite holistically. So the National AI Strategy from last year in December, that's a National AI Strategy 2.0 that was published, talks about how AI can be used for public good, and then what are the ways in which you want to then drive that public good work in AI, right? And one of the components is really about building a trusted ecosystem or a trusted environment for AI. And for us, that really means, number one, putting in place the guardrails, but also really the guardrails is meant to protect consumers, but also then making sure we have enough space for organizations or companies to continue to innovate with AI. So both the use as well as the protection, and driving this concurrently then hopefully creates a virtuous cycle. One, consumers will trust the AI systems or use more, Then two, that then creates more space, hopefully for companies to be able to continue to deliver innovative solutions using AI, right? So that's one, right? Building that trusted AI ecosystem. Number two, how then do we then support this work, given that AI capability is moving so fast? This is something like every other week, actually, maybe every week, there's some new developments in this space. It's been happening in this crazy pace since last year, right? And it's exponentially growing in terms of the development. But yet, the state of science for AI governance is behind. So how then do we make sure that we work together, not just with local organizations and enterprises, but also internationally? We need to partner with other governments, with academia, with industry, to be able to move the needle, at least in governance space. At the same time, for Singapore, it also means we have to be very adaptive, very agile, very practical how we handle these governance policies and tools that we put in place, so that we can continue to evolve them as the technology evolves. And if you've been following the news, just this week, there's a big conversation in Seoul called the AI Safety Summit in Seoul that follows from Bletchley Park last year in UK, where they talk about how governments can work together, how internationally we can work together. So we also want to make sure that the work we do contributes to global development in terms of norms as well as knowledge. So what have we done in this space, and where are we going, right? So I'll just give you some examples of the work that we've done. Sorry, the slide is, again, very small words. We should think about fixing this. But we started in 2019, 2020 with some guidelines, right? One of the very early ones to take ethical AI considerations from just principles. Everybody was just talking about, oh, you must be fair, you must be transparent, you must be explainable. What we did was we took them into very, very specific guidelines into what companies need to think about. Like, for example, setting up, a risk committee, thinking about how do they deal with data and so on. So these were published back in 2019, 2020. They're still very much relevant today, even though a lot of it is focused on traditional AI kind of concerns, right? Then following that, then we started asking ourselves, how then do we make it practical, right, for companies to demonstrate that they have met these requirements? And that's where we developed the AI Verify tool. It's a technical, it's a toolkit that is both a technical testing toolkit as well as a set of processes that you can check to make sure that you're aligned to globally accepted principles around AI. We were anticipating that we need to start building up this capacity, both in the government as well as in the industry, on how to meet eventually compliance requirements from regulations. So we're starting to say, hey, we better start putting in place tools for people to demonstrate, for they understand how do they do these things if they're asked to comply to regulatory requirements. So that's where that was at the back of mind when we came out very Verify. And then we open sourced it last year, and then we set up a foundation to help with the open source work. And then and last year, of course, Gen AI came to be widely accepted by the public or widely used, and that's where we start looking at then how do we translate our work into Gen AI policies, and I'll talk a bit about them later, but we already started thinking about what are the risks, how do we address this risk, where do we want to focus our energies right at the beginning, and then so on. So I'll get into that a little bit later. So really for Singapore, I mean, because before this we talked about regulations in EU, regulations in China, but for Singapore it is really about, number one, supporting industry voluntary adoption of these measures. But we have existing regulations, so we're not really operating a regulatory vacuum. We have regulations in healthcare, finance, we have regulations in online safety, and data protection and so on. This will help to, and these are technology agnostic, and this will help to at least address some of this risk that we see that's coming up. So what should companies do, right? All these things that we put out is really to support companies in terms of how they implement responsible AI properly, right? So first, you can look at the governance framework. These are some measures that you can think about. But secondly, you can also look at some of the domain-specific requirements that have been published. The PDPC has published an advisory guideline on how do you interpret the PDPA in the context of AI, right? Especially around AI recommendation and decision systems. MOH has already published, I think a couple of years ago already, the AI in healthcare guidelines, and then in MAS as well, quite a lot of advisory guidelines for the financial services sector. So these are things that, first, look at the governance framework that gives you some idea of what you need to do within your organization. Two, look at if your domain falls into this area, think about how these will apply to you. Next, you can also then consider how do you use AI Verify as a tool to assess your governance framework and your systems, right? AI Verify, as I mentioned, is a toolkit that allows you to do some process checks. There's something like 90 over process checks. We've mapped it to the NIST, which is the National Institute of Science and Technology. That's the sort of like the Technical and Standards Agency in US. We've mapped it to NIST AI Risk Management Framework. Why we map it? Because, look, everybody listens to NIST, like nobody will think about Singapore, but so we have to make sure that we are sort of aligned and interoperable. Then two, besides the process checks, we have also then looked at how then do we actually help companies do testing, right? So it's a simple toolkit. We looked at what's out there in terms of testing algorithms around the world, in open source, in academia. We put it together into a product that can be downloaded from GitHub, installed as into the company's own environment, and then they run through these processes for fairness, explainability, and robustness. And for now, because of the testing algorithms, it only applies to certain types of AI models like supervised learning. It doesn't address maybe images, mostly tabular data, but that's why we started a foundation to help us continue to improve this toolkit in an open source way. Right? So we have got interesting companies who have started using this, from Singapore Airlines to Zopa to Dell and so on. It's available. Their stories are available on the AI Verify Foundation website. But really, if you look at some of the examples they've given, number one, the process checks help them sort of give them a starting point to think about how they go about implementing these requirements. Then two, the toolkit then allows them to do a little bit of testing for some kind of quantifiable results that they can then show in a nice report to people. Right, so that's on AI Verify. But at the same time, you know, almost nobody talks about traditional AI anymore, even though I think it's still very important, right? Everybody's starting to ask us, so how are you going to test for, how are you going to think about Gen AI? So we're starting to think about how we can help organizations or companies address Gen AI, and looking at many different dimensions, right? Number one, because it's gotten a lot more complicated. Number one, along the life cycle of AI development, right? Who is accountable for what, right? So these are some things that we have to start worrying about. Model developers who actually provide these large models and then train them, to application deployers who take these models, add on some kind of harnesses as well as other capabilities to address some concerns, and then to end users who will put in the prompts to get the output, right? So who is responsible for what when the AI model does something terrible, right? So these are things that we have to think about from an accountability perspective. From a trusted development perspective, how do we think about more transparency along this life cycle? Is it some kind of nutrition label so that people understand the limitations of these AI models? Large model developers have already started to publish a lot of system cards, model cards, and so on. How do we make this into something that's easy for downstream users, such as app developers, understand, and so that they can start putting in place the scaffolding, for example, to address some of the risks that the model developers haven't dealt with, right? And then content provenance, I spoke a little bit about copyright, but this content provenance is really about dealing with how do we address knowing which content is from AI, which content is not fake, for example, mostly dealing with the issues around misinfo, disinfo around AI. So there are ways in which we need to address, again, through transparency, how the content is generated. So those three dimensions and others are in the Model Governance Framework for Gen AI. It was published, we published a draft in January for feedback, comments. We've gotten quite a lot of good feedback, more than 70 over from around the world. We are going to next week launch the final version. Yeah, so, but you can look at all the different dimensions from, you know, data to, you know, at the end of the day, how do we make sure that we continue to remember that AI is for public good, and what are the measures that we have to put in place, such as worrying about jobs and the environment. So specifically, because we have focused a lot of work in our traditional AI space on testing, we'll continue to do quite a lot of work in the testing space. And this actually is, I mean, the conversations this week have been really interesting because we are not the only ones who start to talk about evaluation really. I mean, we've been speaking about evaluation for 2 years, and now everybody is talking about evaluation. So that's sort of heartening. But again, the pace is developing so quickly, we have to make sure that we continue to be relevant, continue to contribute to these global developments. So one of the things we did last year was, which nobody actually did, was to come up with an explanation to regular developers, not your big model labs, but really everybody else, on how you think about evaluating large language models. Because all this capability doesn't reside outside, right? So how then do we make that, information available to general audience, right? So we came up with a taxonomy and catalog called for Gen AI testing, where we explain how do you do Gen AI testing, what are the key methods today, and then where are some of these benchmarks that you can use to do testing with, right? And then we catalog them with a taxonomy. And then we identify areas where we continue to need to develop, as well as hopefully some minimum safety requirements that companies need to think about. So that was work that we did in October. And moving forward, we will then build out the tool. One of the things we say is in that work is we need to have a standardized tool to support testing. So we are building out the tool to address these things that I have on the slide. Number one, how do you do benchmarking? Number two, then how do you do rate teaming? So benchmarks are essentially exam questions that you put to the models, right? And then you get a response. But benchmarks are inherently, while they're inherently useful, they're also problematic today, right? If you're from academia, you know how to set exam questions, but how do you know that these exam questions actually test for the capability, right? So these are questions we're asking ourselves as well. But that's just one problem. Another problem is it's very hard to use existing benchmarks. People do it in any way they want. It's very hard to pull them into a harness that's useful for us to then connect to models, different models, to do testing. So we're trying to figure out how then do we do this easily for the industry, right? Then two, another way is to rate teaming, and rate teaming is really adversary testing a model, but then how then do we make sure that you can do rate teaming properly and at scale? So to address these technical questions, we have developed a tool called Project Moonshot. It's currently in alpha testing, and it's trying to make testing more scalable. It's trying to help organizations think about how they can create benchmark, and then finally how to do rate teaming more easily. So it's still in sort of like a minimum viable product stage. We are getting feedback from some partners, but again, it will be open source and as a baseline for people to help to then start to think about how do they contribute, how do they improve it. And to do that, we're also trying to understand where the issues are in industry with regards to Gen AI testing. So we started a sandbox last year to invite industry to work with us so that we understand where the requirements are. Because context-specific, use case-specific testing actually very, very rarely exists today. Then how do we learn from real examples so that this can be propagated to the wider industry and the wider audience, right? So one example is of a project that we're doing is with Anthropic. We're doing a multicultural, multilingual rate teaming project. Actually, it's completed already. The idea is eventually to develop a rate teaming methodology specifically for the context of languages and culture. And it's actually, for some reason, very popular when we talk to people, right? So everybody's doing a lot of capability testing, but a lot of countries around the world, especially if their main language is not English, are asking themselves, how do they make sure the models are aligned to their culture and their languages? So we want to then take the Anthropic work and make it into more of a general methodology that's useful. Then maybe, hopefully, people can think about developing benchmarks. Almost to the end of my presentation already. Beyond this work that we're doing domestically, we also then need to make sure that we work actively internationally. So we're trying to build a lot of consensus around norms, around how do you go about regulating or putting in place requirements for AI safety and trust. And the way we do it is any platform that is available, we try and help to pull together. ASEAN is one of them, so we publish a guide with the ASEAN, with our ASEAN colleagues on AI governance and ethics, so that there's some consistent way to think about governance within ASEAN. Two, we're working with the Forum of Small States. There's a digital now because the issues of digital are coming to fore, and working with them to develop an AI governance playbook for small states. Our safety institutes, which is we just designated the Digital Trust Center NTU as our AI Safety Institute. We're also making sure that they work together with the other AI safety institutes around the world to advance R&D in AI safety and testing. And then, of course, we participate in all these platforms to push Singapore's requirements, Singapore's interests at these various platforms, as well as provide a little bit more diverse perspective. Because a lot of these places, OECD, GPA, for example. I mean, the UN ones are probably a bit more open to everyone, but some of these are really just limited to countries that are actually very advanced in the use of AI. But we want to then say that actually, besides these requirements, we can also represent what we need here in our region, in ASEAN. That's on the one side, building consensus. On the other side, then, is also how do we make sure that as we dock with individual countries, we continue to be able to interoperate. So US NIST is one that we've already that I've already mentioned. We're looking at international standards bodies also to make sure that we can interoperate, and other bilateral collaborations with other countries, because we've signed these digital economy agreements, this sort of digital FTAs with some of these countries, and we're using that as a platform to address. One is AI governance requirements. Of course, there are many other things as well, but that's a good way in which we can start to talk about AI governance interoperability. So example of the ASEAN Guide, what are some of the things that is covered? We have some recommended principles, what organizations can do. A lot of it is very similar to the model governance framework. since we led the work, so we will of course put a lot of the existing work that we have into the guide. But it has gone through that gauntlet of getting feedback from all the ASEAN countries, so it's helpful that at least there's some consensus in how we think about these issues. And then finally, AI Welfare Foundation is a platform in which organizations can participate. So we have global, but I mean G2G level, but this is actually a B2B kind of platform where organizations can work together to both advance the toolkits that we're putting in out there in open source, but also to share experiences, and increasingly we are using this as a mechanism to seek feedback on some of the things we want to do in our policies, and how then do we improve our tools and guidelines that we put out there. And that's all. Thank you very much, and I'll take questions.
Okay, I am here to facilitate that. Okay, I didn't get any questions from the QR code, so I'm going to open to the floor, and I see one very persistent.
There's one over there, sir.
Okay, maybe.
Really resonated with me, which is that governance tends to be playing catch up with the technology. So I was just wondering whether the government has any teams actually looking into the future of AI, and that we anticipate what might actually be going on so that we can take a more proactive approach.
I think there are many parts of Singapore doing AI. It's both on the development side as well as the governance side, right? So for example, AI Singapore is one big outfit that we fund from a research perspective in terms of looking at, what's next, the next bound for AI. So definitely, but I think the point that I was trying to make is it's not, even for all the efforts that we have here in Singapore, it's still not enough, right? So it's really important that we plug in globally and then connect with, at various tiers, right? Research, government, businesses, to try and then hopefully collectively move this forward together from a governance perspective, actually, because development, you run as fast as anybody, as the companies will run them, and as well as then develop useful, practical things that people can use, organizations can use. Yeah.
Okay, second question.
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to ask a question on the AI ecosystem. You mentioned that it's important to have a trusted environment. So I just want to ask you to comment on, who are the players in this ecosystem, and whether the system or regulators do actually any certification of the players in this environment. I just give you a very simple example. Earlier on, we have a session. One of the questions is how do SME, small companies start? And a common advice is get a consultant.
No.
So the question is, how do we as SME bosses or whatever, know the credibility of these consultants and the system they provide?
No, that's a very good question, actually. We got quite a lot of requests from the industry to say, hey, can we do certification? Certification is one mechanism that you can demonstrate, right? Certain ability to achieve certain standards and certain requirements without having us to then say, oh, you must meet these regulatory requirements, right? So certification is one way in which organizations who voluntarily want to go through that can demonstrate. We are starting to see there's pockets of development in certification. We are thinking about it, whether it's something we want to do in Singapore. But in ISO, for example, there's already starting a lot of work in defining AI standards. And as we all know, ISO will be one way in which people will start to use as a benchmark for certification. So to answer your question very simply, say akan datang, something that we are thinking about and figuring out. But there are starting to be activity in this space around the world. And a lot of third-party testing organizations like Tutsu, Deloitte, all these third-party audit and testing companies are starting to say, hey, can I help you demonstrate your compliance, or that you demonstrate that you actually implemented your AI in the proper way, right? So in a responsible way. So that's also happening. For SMEs, I think You can organize SMEs hopefully into two parts. Number one, the kind of groups of SMEs who basically say, I don't have the resources. I don't think they should go out and talk to a consultant actually for a start, right? They should start think, a lot of how we are helping SMEs adopt AI is actually through the solutions that they can use already. So we're helping to look at SME solutions, our SME Go Digital program, approve solutions for SMEs, and we're starting to look at how we can make sure that a lot of these solutions start to embed AI capabilities in there. So SMEs just need to buy, adopt, and use, right? And maybe a little bit of maybe improving the data, enhancing and so on, or cleaning them up, but ultimately we're trying to make it as simple as possible. Recently somebody asked me, can we give a simple guide? All these things that we put out, right? Like many pages of words that SMEs need to read. Maybe it's very hard for them to spend time going through all this and figuring out what it means for them. So we said, okay, maybe we can think about that. Maybe a simple, to-do for SMEs if they want to think about responsible AI implementation. Just as I mentioned, right, that somebody wrote in the forum page, but why this model generates falsehoods about me? But actually, the model behaves that way. So it's important to help, everyone understand what the technology is, what are its limitations, and how do they use it in a way that's effective and responsible. So I think there are various things that we are looking at from various areas. And for SMEs, both a product perspective, but also maybe a little bit more support from understanding perspective. Yeah.
Okay, finally I got some questions appearing in my iPad, but in the interest of time, I will only choose one question. Here, how do you enforce compliance to the AI standards that you set?
I don't enforce, I can't enforce. I don't have a law to say you must meet, right? But that's don't mean to be facetious about that, but to be honest, I can't, right? But we have existing regulations and we ensure that from an outcome perspective, you meet those requirements. So that's one. Two, I think what we are trying to appeal to organizations is you are using AI, you will need to do it properly anyway, because you will need to make sure that you build trust with your customers. You need to make sure that it does not affect your brand if something happens, right? You need to, and that hopefully are enough drivers. But I'll tell you upfront that I think regulation is always a good driver, but I think in Singapore, we are never starting to think of regulation as a mechanism by default, because I think it's a useful tool. As a government, it's always a useful tool, but it's also a very blunt tool, right? We talk about SMEs. If I impose requirements, the big companies usually have more than enough capability and resources to address these requirements. But what about the small ones? How then do we make sure that when we put in place these requirements, it can address everybody's needs and everyone can comply without too much additional cost? And that's why I think we are looking at other capabilities that we help to build. And hopefully you are motivated by other drivers, whether it's through ESG, your board asking you for things, or maybe just in terms of making sure that you have customers who trust you, then to put in place these mechanisms. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Wan-Xie. And let's give a round of applause.
No, thanks for your time today.
I'm sure you have lots more questions. You can chase after her later. Oh, okay.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lee and Prof. Chu as well. So now may I invite Mr. Donald Ong, Senior Vice President, Advisors Business Development Asia Pacific, up on stage for his talk on navigating an evolving tech landscape. A gentle reminder to scan the QR code if you'd like to submit any questions for him. Mr. Ong, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. A big shout out to the organizers for organizing this wonderful event. And also thank you for the invitation to speak today. As part of my job, I have to travel extensively across Asia Pacific, from India, China, all the way down to Auckland. In fact, I was just in Auckland last week. And if there's one topic our customers and CXO of our customers, they want to engage on, they want to discuss, especially the last 18 months, is definitely the topic of AI and Gen AI. There's definitely a ton of excitement, but at the same time, equal measure in anxiety. So I thought I'll use the time today to share our perspective on how we at MasterCard see this space evolving over the coming years. Now, I grew up with a rotary dial wired telephone, and looking at this crowd, I think some of you did as well. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. But if you had told me back then that 30 years later I'll be standing in front of an audience to speak about artificial intelligence, I would have probably laughed out loud and said that sounds absolutely crazy. But yet here I am, and here we are, standing at the cusp of the AI revolution. It's by no accident that we are here. We have been steadily but surely building up to this point. If you think about advancements like computers, the internet, mobile devices, data, compute power, all these advancements have led us to this particular tipping point. And if you zoom out and look over a longer period of time, you can see a compounding effect with every technology breakthrough driving faster progress and adoption than the one that came before. Electricity took 46 years to achieve a 25% adoption rate in the US. Telephones took 35 years to become mainstream. And you fast forward to more recent times, smartphones took 3 years to reach 100 million users, and ChatGPT just 2 months to achieve the same milestone. And so that rate of change that has been dramatically rising over a period of time, and that's just going to continue going forward. And we see that clearly with businesses ramping up their investments into AI everywhere. It might look like a gold rush, but in many instances, it's actually a matter of survival. If you think about aging populations, low birth rates, that's definitely impacting capacity, that's definitely impacting the cost of capacity. In fact, our own Economics Institute project that for some of these countries, the sustained GDP outlook over the long term is negative for many of these countries. And so moving fast to embrace AI for automation, for productivity gains, to attract investments into the country, it becomes mission critical. I recently read somewhere that the average age of a farmer in Japan is 68 years old. And so for Japan, AI can't come faster. And today, with foundational models, large language models, low-code, no-code applications, creating the opportunity to democratize AI and Gen AI across businesses, industries, and the long tail, we imagine there's going to be an infinite number of use cases that's going to emerge over time. But I think for today, we'll just focus on a few that we think will be fairly transformative. We talked a bit about this in the earlier sessions. The first would be digital assistants or co-pilots. And this will start from performing simple tasks to over time becoming invaluable personal and professional aids. Whether that's to create a presentation deck like this, or helping me book my next family vacation, or helping my son learn a new language faster. Good luck with that. But fundamentally, I think digital assistants and co-pilots is all about making life at home and at work a lot easier. The second would be machine-to-machine connections. And when you combine that with AI, that's going to drive more automation, but also potentially more intelligent experiences. And so imagine you have a camping trip that's coming up, and you're quite excited about that. You're looking for a camping tent. You've shortlisted one on your phone, but you want to have a look at the physical item. And so your digital interface could help you navigate to find the store and then find the item within the store. You find it, you scan it, you add the item to the cart. At the same time, an offer pops up. It's a 20% discount. It's tied to a specific credit card, definitely a MasterCard. You don't have that card, so you click to apply. It gets approved, and you can use it instantly. At the same time, contextual information comes up, like the weather. The forecast is rainy. It recommends you waterproof sleeping bags, waterproof clothes. It helps you find those items in the store. You like them. You add them to your cart. You click to checkout. You grab, and you go. And so in that example, the entire end-to-end experience is fully automated. There's no human intervention. All enabled by machine-to-machine connections and AI between the retailer, the bank, credit bureau, location services, identity services, personalization services, and many more. Now, if you take machine-to-machine connections, AI, and you add to that mix the growing maturity of spatial computing, we see new possibilities to transform human-to-machine interactions. The ability to use hand gestures, eye movements, conversations with co-pilots to engage with virtual objects, images, and virtual applications, all that creating new possibilities in areas like commerce, education, healthcare, entertainment, manufacturing, and many more as well. Now, on the flip side, bad actors are always quick to embrace new technologies. So AI tools to generate hyper-realistic text, audio, video, images, that's increasingly being used to enable scams, fraudulent activities, and disinformation. Now, the rise of malicious deepfakes is definitely spurring a lot of regulations in this space, but at the same time, it's also giving rise to a growing market of AI-powered detection tools. For example, Intel has a product called Fake Catcher, which analyzes your blood flow data and facial motion data to detect manipulation. I don't mean actual human blood samples. Apparently, when our heart pumps blood, there are subtle changes in the video pixel colors, and so those signals that gets captured and sent and fed into an AI model that can then discern if it's real or it's fake. Internally, within organizations, extracting richer, deeper, more actionable insights, that's going to continue to evolve as well, with more companies leveraging advanced analytics, leveraging machine learning, and of course, generative AI and AI to improve decision making. And you add to that the growing use of techniques like data enrichment, where you combine your data set with the data set of others, techniques like federated learning, where you fuse the learnings from two different models of two different entities without actually having to move any of the underlying data around, so that enables cross-entity collaboration. And of course, AI and Gen AI to analyze unstructured data like social media posts, multimedia content. All this is definitely going to come together to unlock even more value from data in the coming years. We see a massive opportunity in the banking industry, especially from a lending standpoint, to use AI and Gen AI to simplify the application process, to improve the quality and accuracy of the consumer data that's shared, to potentially improve credit scoring to be more precise using unstructured data, leveraging Gen AI, and potentially even create net new credit scoring models that widens the pool of credit eligible customers. Now, thanks to our network, we are able to execute AI value creation at scale, and we do this simplistically in three ways. We leverage our unique data set. Obviously, that comes out of the billions of transactions we process every year. To be precise, 140 billion transactions across 3 billion cards and 120 million merchants globally. We take the outputs from that unique data set and we deploy them through platform technology, and they integrate nicely into our client workflows to help them accelerate execution and time to value and time to money. And then lastly, we augment their teams with our domain experts so that they have the skills to solve for a specific problem that they want to solve for. For example, we are using AI to help our retailers, drive up more engagement. So consumers today, they are very used to that TikTok, Netflix experience, right? Where everything is hyper-personalized, and it is said that if you cannot catch somebody's attention within 6 seconds, you will be swiped away. And so our dynamic yield platform helps retailers deliver that hyper-personalized experience and content, and that helps them drive up engagement rates, that helps them drive up conversion rates. And we recently leveraged generative AI to launch Shopping Muse, which is a conversational commerce experience that sits alongside the content, so that makes the product discovery experience more like chatting with a friend. So for example, say you have a wedding that's coming up in Bali, you're not sure what you want to wear, Shopping Muse can take that context and it can output outfit recommendations, and then you can iterate with Shopping Muse on the colors, on the style, and finally land at something that you like to purchase. And so that makes the product discovery experience much better than having to scroll through tons of inventory on your small smartphone. As a global payments network, it's no surprise that when we think about deploying new technology, we definitely would look towards using it to instill more trust in commerce transactions. And so we recently used AI and Gen AI to launch what we call Decision Intelligence Pro, which scans over 1 trillion data points and within 50 milliseconds is able to predict the likelihood of a fraudulent transaction. And that has helped our bank partners, our issuers, boost detection rates from anywhere between 20% to even as high as 300% in some instances. We recently announced the launch of our AI-powered scam prevention and detection tools. Scams is a massive, massive issue globally. In 2021, over $55 billion was lost due to scams. Anybody in the room want to take a guess what that figure grew to in 2023? Got a very shy bunch. Somebody? No? 100? $1 trillion. Okay. In the UK, it's reported that there's one scam victim, not attempt, there's one scam victim every 12 seconds. Okay? So massive, massive issue. I think lots more to do in this space. Let me close with some cautionary calls. I think most companies that we engage with, they recognize that in the digital economy, the only currency that really matters is the currency of trust. And so it's fantastic, and we heard some of it earlier, it's fantastic there's a lot of emphasis on data privacy, data protection, governance on AI development, to help safeguard against risk like hallucinations, like amplification of bias, like breach of privacy and copyright. At MasterCard, we anchor all our technology development on 7 data and technology principles: fairness, accountability, transparency, privacy, inclusion, innovation, and social impact. And so our AI governance teams, they review all the AI that we develop, build, or buy against these 7 principles. And we have also invested significantly into automated bias testing, bias mitigation tools, as well as privacy-enhancing technologies. And that's internally within MasterCard. And then externally, we are extending that know-how to help shape standards around the world. For example, we are partnering with Princeton University, the Alan Turing Institute in the UK to publish research work relating to responsible AI and bias testing. We are also a founding member of the US AI Safety Institute by the US Department of Commerce. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I'm back again. Okay, questions on the QR? I think some of you are still scanning. So in the meantime, before I see any questions, maybe let's get started. I saw your 6 risks, right? Amplification of bias, lack of transparency, and so on. So among these 6, what do you think is the most important one?
They're all important.
Equally important. Okay, equally important.
That's a simple question. Keep them coming like that.
Yes, yes. So basically, for small businesses, then how do we manage, right? How do we go about
I thought there was an interesting discussion earlier from small businesses. Obviously, a lot of the development and value is going to start with the big tech, right? But the good thing is a lot of these things are now open source, right? And hopefully with low code, no code applications means you don't really need developer capabilities. Hopefully, then that makes it easy for you to, plug and play for the particular use cases that you want, right? Because frankly, to build everything from scratch is very, very unfeasible for small businesses, right? The compute power that you need and things like that, yeah.
Okay. I don't see any questions yet, so maybe raise your hands. Yes.
Hi, I'm Pamela.
Hi.
A question about how MasterCard is actually helping your SME customers in adopting AI, like what you actually have spoken, to prevent, actually to protect their assets by increasing revenue or reduce the risk that they're encountering.
So we are B2B to C or B2B to B2B because we work through our bank customers, right, to acquire merchant and then process those transactions, right? So the relationship is between the acquiring bank and the SME, not with MasterCard and the SME, right? So they acquired SME transactions, then the acquirer sends those transactions to us to process and send to different issuing banks, right? So we create value-added services for our acquiring banks, who will then distribute it out to SME clients, right? This could range from data insights to analytic outputs, right? Models that they can simply digest and then use it to optimize pricing, optimize marketing, out-of-the-box marketing tools and playbooks, cybersecurity diagnostic. We do quite a bit of that. We do something called Digital Readiness Index, right? So the acquirers can use our tool to scan all the SMEs and give them a report to say, versus a benchmark, where do you stand on digital readiness in terms of the sophistication of your e-commerce transactions and how you process them and how you accept them from consumers, right? And the UI, UX, and things like that. So those value-added services we do distribute through the acquirers and acquirers to the SMEs, because we try to create that whole ecosystem effect.
Next question. Anyone from the, okay.
If there are no question from the back, I'll take this. Okay. Looking at your last slide, you have 6 aspects or challenges, right? So I want to pick 2 of them, which is the amplification of bias and the lack of transparency. So as a financial institutions, you help banks to do the scoring. And how do you actually explain? Do you explain a situation where a person's credit is being rejected, and how do you explain that your system is bias-free?
Yeah, so again, we don't lend, we don't do lending. The banks do lending, right? We are just the payments technology network, right? I think when it comes to our own bias mitigation, right? Definitely we have tools to test against that and against our principles. If you can't explain it, right? To your point, transparent, you can't do it. It's got to be, I think our governance committee has to be satisfied that we can explain what's going on in terms of the results of the model, right? And we can test for, there's no particular bias in terms of overly punishing certain cohorts of segments of customers as well, right? So they will run counter models to make sure that the outputs do not do that, right? So that's the governance framework against the principles, right? So we got to have principles first, right? What is our principles when it comes to using this technology? And then you need tools, right? Automated bias testing, you need bias mitigation tools, you need privacy enhancing tools to strip away all the PII data.
So your transparency is actually relating to internal transparency?
No, anything that we build, right? We have to review them against all these 7 principles.
You find that you can explain
yeah.
Then would you explain to your customer that your credit card application is rejected?
No, we don't do the credit scoring. The banks do the credit scoring. Yeah, we're not a lender. We're not a bank.
Okay, one final question. Anyone else in the audience?
Okay, this is a bit off tangent. My son is getting married, and I'm looking for a suit. And I find your suit very interesting. Is there a way where I can scan it and then do a search and find out which store is making this suit and they accept MasterCards?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
No, is there a way for me to scan your suit and then go through the app and find out which store is making the suit and they accept MasterCards?
Good question. I need to come back to you on that. But great idea. Oh, there is? There you go.
So there is this feature, circle to search. You take a picture of anything or anything you find on the internet.
Oh, that's image-based, yeah.
So just click on the home button, probably 2 seconds, and then there will be a window where it will frame
Correct.
the image and it will search for you. Then it will bring up all the results where you can purchase it.
Correct. Yeah, there are applications and startups that deliver that technology. Yeah. That's Google-based, yeah.
It's actually a Google technology.
Open source, yeah, there you go.
Okay, now I know what my wife is doing when she's pointing her cameras at items that she wants. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's all the time
Thank
we have.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Donald.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ong and Prof. Chu. So may I now invite Dr. Chong Jun Kwan, Chief Data Officer, Nanyang Technological University, up on stage for his talk on data-driven decision-making, challenges and opportunities in the education sector. Once again, if you'd like to ask questions, there's the QR code for you to scan. With that, Dr. Chong, please.
Hello, my name is Jun Kwan. I'm the Chief Data Officer of NTU. And today what I'm going to talk about is basically a way step back from the previous two speakers. You have seen a lot of, getting a lot of information, getting a lot of exciting things that happens at the forefront of AI and Gen AI. I'm going to just step back and really, and also very selfishly ask your help to help me address two challenges that I have faced in my job. So I'm going to share with you those two challenges, and then I will also share with you what my approaches are for those two challenges. And I welcome a suggestion on maybe there are other ways to help me solve those two challenges. And these challenges arises from, my 9 months of spending my time here as a CDO for NTU and trying to address quite a few decisions that my senior management is making. And hopefully, it can help my job, lighten my job a little bit, And I think there are some of my colleagues in the same industry are here, and maybe we can brainstorm and get also pick your brain as well. Now, okay. So I'm between you and lunch, but I will make sure that you have time. And today, so what's my main job as Chief Data Officer? My main job, if I want to summarize in one sentence, it will be to provide insights and analytics for my senior management in their decision making. Okay. Now, obviously, the insights and analytics all comes from data. And data is always the problem. So I'm going to show you why I'm facing those the two challenges and where those two challenges come from, and they're coming from data, right? And first of all, let me share with you the type of decisions that we make at the university. And you can see this, the first one is faculty recruitment and evaluation. Now, we are different from other industry in the sense that our faculty members come in and go out. Some go out, right? And that repeats every year. And every year we have to go out and recruit. And every year there'll be some who could not make it, okay? So the process that goes on is that what we need to do is we need to do evaluation. Every year we need to do evaluation. And that evaluation of faculty involves at least 23 people. So it's not one single boss that say, okay, I'm going to keep you, I'm going to fire you. And there's no way around because we have what we call a tenure clock. A tenure clock means that as an assistant professor, when you come in, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 3-year contract. And at the end of it, if you cannot make it, you have to show yourself out, okay? Because that's the end of your tenure. And we're going to go out and find another one to replace you. So we do this all the time, right? It is never an equilibrium. Right? There will be few that will keep, and then we replace, and then if the program grows or the department grows, we have to hire more. But that's the process that we go through. And it involves 23 people, at least 23 people. And out of those 23 people, there are some that are external, outside. And they are our competitors, that involve our competitors as well in evaluating our faculty member. And that's the process that we go through, right? So there is a lot of decision making in there. Not about individual cases, but at the senior management level, we talk about what's the structure and the process that we need to design to go to allow this process to be implemented at the individual department and school level, so that we keep the best faculty member that we can get, and we get the best faculty member that we can have, right? That's the issue that we face. Second type of decision that we have is about program and course evaluation. Every year, there are about roughly 2,000 courses that run through, just undergraduate, okay? I'm not even counting master level program. There are many more of the master level. Even undergraduate alone, 2,000 plus program. So we have to have a good structure to evaluate those 2,000 programs and decide what to keep and what to continue, including programs, right? That is the kind of decision that we need to make as well. Now, again, at the senior management level, the provost and the provost council have to decide what kind of structure that we put in place to make sure that we refresh our offering constantly, right? We want to keep up to date. We want to keep our graduate up to date. We want to train the best employee for you, right? Third one is student admission. Again, this is not as a, every year if you are a business out there, you try to recruit your customers and your customer keep with you, there will be some loyal customers. In education sector, we get our student come in, 4 years later they go out. So we're constantly losing customers and we're constantly trying to get new customers, okay? Things has changed a little bit. Now we're talking about continuing education. There's a change of mentality and framework, and university is basically saying that, look, you're forever our student. We want to keep training you. It's not a scam. Huh? It is really a serious thing, because have you seen AI coming on? Everyone feels that they should be trained too, right? If you have not been exposed to this, you need to be trained. And come to NTU, we have the School of Computing and Data Science, and AI is very much featured in there. So this is something a process that we train. So we have students in and out, and again, we need a process and a system that will deal with that. And obviously, student assessment, we do grade our student. And finally, university reputation, right? We need to make sure that we are competitive. We need to make sure that we collaborate with the right institute, with the right university. We collaborate with our competitors as well. And we need a process to evaluate that as well, right? These are the type of decisions that we face, okay? And today, I'm just going to use one of them as an illustration for the two challenges that I face. I do face all those challenges in all these 5 types of decisions. And these are the things that keep me awake at night. So hopefully you can, let me have a bit more sleep along the way in the future. Now, what are the 2 challenges? First, what I face is an uneven data coverage, meaning that, and I'm sure every one of you face that kind of situation. That means you don't get all the data that you want. And a lot of time, there's a big chunk of the data on the particular part of it that is missing. And it is missing not because you're not collecting it. It is missing because those people are not coming to you to give you that data. And you need to know that. Because if you don't know that you're missing those data, you're going to, what happened to you? You're going to, when you give this to, if I'm giving this to my boss, and my boss make the wrong decision because I don't have a good data coverage, I'm in trouble, right? So this is something that I want to make sure, as a chief data officer, I want to make sure that the insight and the analytics that I generate for my boss to make decision is complete and correct. And these are the 2 challenges that I'm facing to ensure that is what's going to happen, right? So you can have, there are 2 types of uneven data collection. One is you have uneven in terms of, for example, give you an example, maybe most of you're seeing a lot of male customers. You're seeing very few or no female customers, okay? So your data is very male heavy, okay? And what are you going to do with that? That's even uneven data coverage. Uneven in the sense that it is the same data variable called gender, but you have uneven in terms of the label. And there is also uneven data coverage based on different variables. Okay? Maybe you're very even in age. You know, you have coverage over all different age group. It is according to the census that you are seeing. It's very well covered, but not on your gender. So there is uneven there. Across range and within range. These are the kind of uneven data coverage that I'm facing. Now, so what's the problem here? I'll show you the challenge later on, but the key fact is this. Human beings, when make decisions, tend to lean towards the variables or the parameters that are most clear. They tend to avoid ambiguous data, ambiguous side of the data, and focus on the clear part of the data. You want to be easy. So you look at the data, and the data tell you that, okay, on this variable is very clear. Option A gives you better return than option B. Okay, variable 1. But variable 2, very muddy. You don't know how it's going on. You have a lot of measure, and it's very ambiguous, and you cannot rely on variable 2 to make your decision. What do? You lean towards variable 1. You say, oh, you know, this is giving a very clear signal, so I'm going to just look at variable 1 and use that to decide. Okay? And that is going to cause a problem, because it could potentially be the fact that variable 2 is the one that is going to show you, and it is going to be the one that is more important in deciding which one is which option is the better one for you. Okay? So I'll give you an example later on. Now, second one is a bias preference towards decision errors. Okay? Give a simple example. You have two options to choose, option A and option B. Okay? Now, you're going to potentially make two errors. One is you choose the best option, not knowing that whether the other one is the better one. So you choose an option, okay, trying to make sure that, this is something that I probably am not going to choose a worse option, but it's the one that you forego a better one. Okay? Now, people like to avoid making mistakes. They always choose the one that they will, because they hate something that keep reminding them. You don't want to choose someone that later on you will regret. Because you will constantly be there reminding you that you have made the wrong decision, you have made the wrong decision, you have made the wrong decision, right? But then, sometimes the one that is actually better off is the one that you have forgone. Okay. I'm going to show the graph to show you what does it mean. In our technical term, it's called error type 1 and type 2 error, okay? Or false positive or false negative. Like false negative, a false negative decision is not going to be in your face because you never see it. You think that this is a wrong choice. So therefore, you did not take it. But it's a wrong choice. You never chose it. So you never face it. You never know that you make mistake. Or maybe you do, but you don't, later on if you go and find out. Now, what is a false positive? False positive is something that you think that, oh, this is a correct choice I have. I chose it, but it turned out to be the wrong one. But you have to live with the consequence, right? The false negative is something that you don't live with because it doesn't remind you. And that is the strong preference that people have. And that pushes you into having a preference, a bias preference toward the error the type of error that you're committing. Okay? Now, so let me, why do we face this constantly, especially in the education sector? As I mentioned, we constantly have to judge people and have to choose people, whether it's student or faculty member. And constantly go through our university, and we have to constantly make decisions whether do we make the right choice, do we make the right choice, right? And a lot of time, we don't have data that is readily put in front of you that says that here, this is all the data that you have, and you make a choice. And it's not as simple and easy as 1, 2, 3, right? And you might think otherwise in terms of student admission, oh, we just look at A-level score, we just look at IB score and whatnot. Not as simple as that. There are multiple factors that comes in. How do we, there are a lot of feedbacks, there are a lot of review reports that doesn't give you a scale. No referees will come in and tell you that, hey, Dr. Chong, for this particular candidate, from a scale of 1 to 10, I'm giving the person 5. I'm giving a person 7. Okay? No such thing. We have to evaluate, and we have to compose, and we have to extract whatever is being said in the referee report, and we have to compile and combine and aggregate until we get a number, until we get a position. And that's the difficult part that makes these two challenges even more challenging that we have here. Now, of course, we also face with the problem of non-response bias. Like what I said just now, maybe certain group of students doesn't like to come to NTU. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating. Huh? And then we never see that data, right? If we don't see that data, how do we go about and trying to convince that group of students to come? Because they've never seen that data. Same thing for customer, right? If you're missing a group of customer that you never had data with, and how do you begin to try to attract that group of customers? So that's called non-response bias. We don't have that data. We never know how to deal with that group of customers. So what's challenge one? Now, if you think about the decision that you make, right? You have multiple factors. How do you make a decision? One way to make decision essentially is you take all the different factors. Suppose there are 10 different factors they are looking at. You put a weight on each one of them, and you put a score on each one of them, and you sum them up, you look at the score. I'm being simplifying, okay? I'm being simplifying. I know that decision doesn't come along easily that way. But if you do that, you need to put a weight to each of those factors, right? It could be a weight of 0 and 1. That is still weighting it, right? This is aggregation. Another way that deal with it is sequential. What is sequential? You pick the most important factor, you decide which one wins out. Let's say there are two options, option A and B. Which one wins out? And then you look at factor 2, you see which one wins out. And then we try to score and see which one has more win. And then you choose the one that has more win, right? Now, whatever way you do, these are typically the two types of decision process that you go through. No matter what, it involves weights. It involves your idea of which one is more important, which factor is more important. Okay? That's the weight. Now, if you keep to your weight, if you think that, okay, my weight is guided by my value and my whatever vision, mission, and whatnot, okay, that's fine. And you stick with it, that's fine. But the problem here is, when you look at the data, and when I present the data or present the analytics and insight to my management, and I say that, oh, this part of it, we don't have much data, it's very ambiguous. And it happens to be the most important factors that the top management thinks that they need. But if I tell them, very ambiguous, I don't have much data to deal with here, what would they do? They'll just say, oh, this one doesn't help me decide, So what do? I go to the second most important, and I go to the third most important until I encounter one that gives me a very clear answer. And the clear answer tells me that option A is better than option B. Now, here, this is a problem. Because you're avoiding the ambiguity of the data, for the most important variable, and you are relying on the third and fourth important variable and trying to decide on that, and that's the problem. So as my function is to make sure that that doesn't happen. If I let that happen, I'm not doing my job. And how do I deal with this? Right? How do I deal with this? Now, we always say, oh, let's just get more data, right? Let's just get more data. Okay, what if it is not possible to get more data? Now, this is something that I do. It may not be possible for me to get more data, but if I know of roughly the range of the data that might turn out to be, what do? I do sampling, which is what I call simulation. I just sample. Sample until I have enough power to say that, oh, through that sampling, I drive away some of the ambiguity, and then I present those data to my management. Okay. Now, not that I'm asking them to make decision on a simulated data. I'm telling them essentially how sensitive their decision is to this non-availability of data, to the how sensitive those are to those things. That's the way I argue for my boss to give me more money to go and look for more data. Right? You have to find a way, and this is a way to show that it is important to get more data. And how do I show it? I show it by simulation. I show it by telling them that, look, this is what's going to happen. Unless you agree on certain point, unless you want to, and make it very clear that if they're willing to accept a certain assumption, I can get an even more refined data for them to make a clearer decision. So that's a step that I take. Okay. Now, another one that I usually take is benchmarking. Left, right, and center. Right? Top and bottom. What do I do? Give you an example on faculty recruitment. So I want to recruit someone. I don't know how good that person is. So therefore, the first thing that I need to do is I want to benchmark. How good is this person? Right? Naturally, my boss will ask me, oh, how good is this? So what do? I find people who are their peers all over the world, right? Find people who are their peers, and I try and construct a profile. And I find people who are slightly, graduated slightly earlier than them. I form a profile. So you're going to see what? You're going to see their peers. You're going to see people who are 3 or 4 years earlier than them. Okay? You're going to see their peers in the local institution within NTU itself. You're going to see the peer that is outside, maybe in Hong Kong, or some in Europe and some in US. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to corner that candidate's profile with other profiles that are providing as approximation. I'm able to use as a benchmark to let them gauge how good is this person. I don't have enough data on this person to be able to determine that he's the best, or he's up here, right? But I'm just trying to corner him in such a way that, oh, he's going to be within this bound. So essentially what I'm doing in benchmarking, I'm providing a range for my boss to decide, is this acceptable to you? You're getting someone in this range. I can't give you a more precise one. This is a range defined by this group of people. What would you do? Decide on that. And that's what I do for uneven data coverage. Okay. Now, how much time do I have? 5 minutes, I have 5. Okay. So the other one is what I call type 1, type 2 error. Okay. So type 1 error is error of selecting a worst option. You think that you are selecting the best option, but you're not. So it's called false positive, right? The type 2 error is error of missing out on a better option. So this is false negative. You reject, but you're rejecting the wrong option. Okay. Now, for a decision maker, you tend to have preference towards committing type 1 error. Now, if you have done any statistics, you might have learned hypothesis testing, and they will tell you 95% confidence interval, which means that it is 2.5% alpha. Alpha is called type 1 error. Okay? So type 1 error is the 2.5%. Now, what is the usual number that people use for type 2 error? 20%. So people in general, okay, as a rule of thumb, out in the whatever statistical world, it will become accustomed to 95% confidence interval. Although people talk less about 20% type 2 error, people don't want to talk about it because most people prefer type 1 error, right? But these two are linked. That's why I'm asking you, pay more attention to type 2 error. Can you afford to be a type 2 error? Can you afford to commit a type 2 error? Right now, it's 1 to 10. No, 1 to 10, sorry. 2.5%, right? Let's say 5%. So it's 1 to 4. What you are saying is that every 4 type 1 error is the same as 1 type 2 error. Okay? You potentially hiring 4 mediocre, you're okay with committing 4 error in the face versus 1 that you're missing out. Because you're worried that it will be in your face, so you keep it very low, right? 5%, 2.5%. Now, so if I may, okay, I know this is, I used to be a professor, so it has to be a graph. You have to have a graph to represent the idea. So you have 2 options, right? You have 2 options. Option A is the blue curve. Option B is the red curve. Now, you are not sure about the quality. That's why it is a distribution, right? And the distribution is for option A, the mean means the mean rating, the mean quality of the candidate potentially is 7. And the mean for option B is around 8, okay? 7 and 8, the mean, okay? But you are not sure because of the distribution. Now, what is type 1 error? Type 1 error is that you are choosing option A because the number that you saw is above roughly 7.7. Can you see the number? Probably not. Okay, you see that black bar? Black bar is actually at 7.7. Okay, anything above 7.7, if you care about type 1 error, you're saying that, oh, okay, I see 7.7. I think he is better than 7. I think he is much better. But that is exactly the error you make. Because somehow it tikam, you get 7.7. But he's actually a 7, okay? Because some way you tikam, there are 2.5 or 5% that he's going to get this 7.7. Lucky, multiple exam, and this exam comes out 7.7, but he's actually a 7. That is a type 1 error. So there is a very minor percentage of 5, well, in this case, I choose to be 5%, there is a chance that a person with 7 will come out to be above 7.7. And then you may conclude that, hey, you know what? I got a guy who is 7.7 or above. Must be a good guy. But when the person comes on board, you realize that he is a 7. He just got lucky and become 7.7, right? Same thing, if you look at that 7.7, right? And you take the red distribution, the area towards the left, well, yeah, your left, right? Is called type 2 error. Okay? Now, that one essentially is saying what? Oh, I see this guy, 7.6. Wow. Very likely to be a 7 guy. But there is a 20% chance that a guy with an 8, with rating 8, there is a 20% chance that he will get below 7.7. 20% chance. So you may be missing out on someone who is actually an 8 because it happened to be that instant show you a 7.7 or 7.6. He underperformed for just round. There is a chance, 20% chance that he underperformed. Okay? So this is a problem that I'm facing. So this is also the problem that I would like I want to acclimatize my boss. But fortunately, my big boss is more acclimatized than I do. He cares more about this, so I don't worry about the big boss. I'm trying to worry about my other bosses. And to make sure that they are acclimatized to this, that there is a type 2 error lurking there, that you need to pay attention to. Okay, so let me wrap up here. So what do I do? Now again, collect more data. So that's always a solution, right? Collect more data and then you will get. So what do collect more data means? So let me show you how collect more data will result in. If I collect more data, right? Now, just now all the numbers I simulate. This one, I also simulate. Now, but this time round, I collect 10 times more data. Okay? Instead of that original set of data, I collect 10 times more. That means I decome 10 more times. If I decome 10 more times, the variance reduce. Now it's very clear. An 8 is an 8, a 7 is a 7. So sometimes, if you're unclear, what do? The first reaction I'll give to you is, go and find more data. That's why I'll always tell my team, right? You cannot decide, go and find more data. Okay? Doesn't necessarily have to be the same set of data. But a lot of times, that's not at the luxury. We are under time pressure, we are under various things. But what else can we do, right? So let me go back. So what do we do? So to me is, again, what I like to do is I like to perform sensitivity analysis and look at how much my decision will be affected by some of those operational parameters, like number of data points, like how close the assumptions are. I perform sensitivity analysis, and I advise my bosses that this is how sensitive a decision is going to be, right? If I perform, let's say, if I collect 100 times more data, and it is just squeezing a little bit, then no point, because your decision is not going to change, right? You only collect data when you know that the data is going to change your decision. Has a very high chance of changing your decision. Okay, so I think that's something that guides me in trying to address those two challenges. Is usually I'll do simulation, I'll do sensitivity analysis to make sure what's the impact on the decision if something changed. And also I'll do benchmarking, that is collecting data from the surrounding thing. Not exactly the same thing, I'm collecting data in the neighborhood and trying to see, okay, how far is this from this neighborhood? And you're bound to be able to provide a range. And that might help you. Okay, like top and bottom, left and right, find people covering with different characteristics and trying to produce that. If you don't have data on the female, okay, let's ask a simple question. How would you think your female customer is going to behave differently? What's the key essential assumption that you need to make to make the female different from the male customers? You take that assumption, you do the simulation, you do the sensitivity analysis, and you see whether your decision will change or not. If your decision is not going to change, fine, that's it. You don't need to go and collect those data. The male data is as good as female data because you're not going to change your operation anyway. You're not going to change your decision anyway. All right, so I think that's it. No time for question, but I welcome question later on, and I welcome suggestion as well later on.
Okay. Any quick question? Before
you are going to open. Thank you very much.
Any quick one? Any quick question? Too technical? But I think it's good, good information. Yes. Good question. Quick one.
So if you base your hiring based on historical, so how do you get emergent or novel criteria for hire? Because you get this group thing. For example, I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you only hire male professors. Then how do you get female professors in? If gender was one of the criteria, yeah.
So you're talking about lacking female past female data professor.
Using criteria may not be female, but it may be something else. Like for example, a technical background versus a qualitative background. So if your decision process is that we want to hire quantitative researchers, but then you miss out on the qualitative one, which is something you're trying to get. Yeah.
Right. Oh, so I mean, again, there's always benchmark from other schools and benchmark from other university as well that I can use to provide. Again, I'm cornering it with other different benchmarking, and that's what I will do. Yeah. Any suggestion on how I should address my challenges?
Hire randomly.
Huh?
Hire randomly.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Chong. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now concluded the first half of our program. A buffet lunch has been provided for you at the event square. But before you go, please remember to take your belongings and any litter that you might be having at your seating areas. So see you back at this auditorium at 1:30 p.m., where we'll have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Roy Yu Bao from Corpus Transformation. Thank you and bon appetit.